Have a daughter who's 6. I am not biologically related to her at all. There is no blood relation between us. I was friends with her mother for most of my childhood. We were never involved romantically and were always just friends. She had her daughter at 23 with her 25-year-old husband. When my daughter was a newborn, about 3 months technically, both her mother and father were killed. I won't go into too much detail for privacy reasons, but it was a workplace shooting. My friend and her husband had worked in the same building and were both killed. Both my friend and her husband had grown up with less than ideal families and didn't have any siblings, so there wasn't any next of kin for their daughter to go to. However, because I was close with them, I was able to adopt her. Even though I had been iffy about the idea of kids, I didn't want their daughter to grow up in foster care or around people who didn't have a connection to her bio parents, so I stepped in. My parents and siblings know that my daughter is not my actual daughter biologically speaking. My daughter, I'll call Lily for the post, also knows that she's adopted. I never really hid the fact that she was adopted. She knows her parents are dead and were killed by a bad man, but I'm saving the details for when she's older. Lily does not look like me at all. She looks exactly like her mother and biological dad. Most people assume that I'm her bio dad and that she just took after her mom. I don't ever really correct this when and if people assume this because it just seems unnecessary. My brother has been with his fiancée for about 2 years now. A few weeks ago we were all meeting up at my parents' house and my SIL saw an old picture of me, my friend and her husband. She pointed to my friend and asked who she was, and I explained that it was Lily's mother. SIL got quiet and stood in front of the picture for a while. I didn't think much of it. To clarify, she knows my friend died, but I guess didn't know that she had been married, or that Lily is not my bio daughter. I suppose she assumed my daughter was mine and my friend's biological daughter. My SIL got a DNA test done on my daughter behind my back. She used my brother's DNA for the test, and when it came back that they weren't related, she knew that meant me and Lily weren't related. She came up to me with the results and waved them in my face, saying that I was taking care of a dead woman's affair baby. She said this to me in front of my daughter. I just stared at her for a while before bursting out laughing at this. I told her I knew Lily wasn't my biological daughter, and that this thing called adoption exists. Her face went red and she stormed off. My brother is mad. I embarrassed his fiancée, but I said she embarrassed herself by DNA testing a kid that isn't hers and then parading the results up to me. What did she want me to do? What was her goal with this? Did she want me to break down and abandon my daughter? My brother said she thought she was doing the right thing and called me an asshole. I don't feel like the asshole, especially considering my SIL was the one who stuck her nose where it didn't belong. I'm asking for Reddit opinions, mostly just for validation. So was I the asshole? AITA has no consensus bot. OOP was NTA. Did the brother's fiancé assume OOP was married to the deceased friend? OOP, I can see how she assumed that we were together. In the picture I had my arm around her shoulders. This was before my friend was married to her husband. At the time that picture was taken they were just friends. Commenter, I think you're a hero. I'm proud of you. If anything ever happens to me, I know my daughter will be so loved and cared for and raised in a loving household. I hope somehow your friend and Lily's daddy are resting peacefully knowing she's got a papa that loves her. I'm going back to cutting onions now. OP, I appreciate that, a lot. I'm doing my best to raise Lily with the values and beliefs her mother and bio dad had and wanted to raise her with, even if some of them differ a bit from my own. Does OOP know what kind of DNA test Sil took for his daughter? OOP, I believe they were doing one of those home DNA kits, though I don't know what company they did it through. Commenter, NTA, she wanted to stir some shit up, that's a hell of a lot of effort to help. Also, I'd be pissed about how she got Lily's DNA to do this. It didn't go the way she thought it would, so she got mad. Your brother is just trying to side with his soon-to-be wife. Update, August 31st, 2024. TLDR spoiler. My brother thought I had been having an affair with Lily's mom and thought I was Lily's bio dad. He tricked Sil into believing that I was in a relationship with Lily's mom and was Lily's bio dad. Sil then saw the picture of Lily's mom and her husband, and assumed Lily was an affair child between the two of them and was being led on to believe that I was Lily's bio dad. My Sil ended up coming to my house and apologizing, as well as telling me the full story. My brother put her up to the DNA test. When I first adopted Lily, my brother for some reason believed that Lily was my bio daughter. He thought that me and Lily's mom were together and just weren't telling anyone. He believes that when she got pregnant, Lily's mom told me that Lily was mine and that she was going to just say that it was her husband's, and I went along with it because I didn't really want kids. SIL was under the impression I believed I was Lily's bio dad. She saw the picture of Lily's mom and I, and after asking for clarification on who she was, assumed we were together in it, and then got suspicious when she saw that the other guy in the picture, Lily's actual bio dad, looked a lot like Lily. I also want to clarify, I didn't tell her that Lily's bio dad was in the picture because she had specifically pointed to Lily's mom, and I assumed she knew that Lily was adopted. I didn't know my brother had been telling her lies for nearly 2 years. She got the DNA test out of her own suspicions, and my brother helped her with it because he thought it would reveal that I was actually Lily's bio dad. He manipulated her into thinking that it would clear the air of suspicion, when really he was just trying to prove that I was really Lily's bio dad and lying about the reasons for adoption. Well, of course the results proved I wasn't Lily's bio dad and that my brother was wrong. My brother felt too embarrassed to confess to his fiancée that he had lied about the circumstances, which is why Sil confronted me with the results. My SIL also apologized for showing me the results in front of my daughter. She told me that her mom had an affair and cheated on her father, got pregnant with another man's kid, and had let her father believe the kid was his. Her father was devastated by this when he found out, and she grew very resentful of women who do that to their spouses. She had wanted to sit me down and talk to me about it without my daughter, but when she saw me with my daughter she got angry thinking I was being led on to believe I was raising my daughter when I was actually raising another man's kid, and she ended up exploding and immediately waved the results in my face. My SIL does feel very guilty, and she's angry at my brother for lying to her. I'm not angry at her for doing the test, because she thought she was doing the right thing. I also forgave her for the way she told me about the results, because clearly affairs are a sensitive subject for her and I can understand why she would have exploded like that. I'm pretty sure she plans to break up with my brother now, and I don't blame her. When I called and asked my brother about this, he admitted it. When I asked why he would think this, he said that he couldn't think of a reason why a man who had been against having kids at the time would willingly adopt a baby without having a blood connection to it. He told Sil that I was Lily's bio dad and was aware of the fact. He took it a step further, and said that me and Lily's mom were together at the time of Lily's conception. Both me and my parents have been in low contact with my brother for a while now. I know I will forgive my brother eventually, but I can't do that right now. He believed I was low enough to have an affair with a married woman, get her pregnant, take no responsibility, allow her to pass off the kid as another man's, and then only take responsibility because her mom died. Relevant comments. OOP on how Lily is handling all of those. Is she mad at her uncle and his fiancé? OOP. She was confused and I had to explain to her what SIL had said in terms she would understand. She was angry SIL would think that of her mom, and I had to explain that she had been lied to and didn't think that anymore. She's not mad at SIL anymore but doesn't want to ever talk to her uncle again. OOP on fatherhood since adopting Lily. OP, LOL, yes I can admit that I'm definitely a lot softer since becoming a father. Adopting my daughter made me have to finally be mature, something I wasn't in my 20s when I adopted her. Commenter, both your brother and Sil are getting off too lightly. He butted into your family and lied to his wife. And sensitive issue or not, she still violated your daughter's privacy then called her an affair child derisively in front of her. Commenter. When I asked why he would think this he said that he couldn't think of a reason why a man who had been against having kids at the time would willingly adopt a baby without having a blood connection to it. Your brother is really showing his whole ass here. Your brother was both a terrible sibling and partner. He riled up his fiancée based on her trauma in order to enlist her to help in deceiving you. Awful. OP, I really want to stress this point, take the words right out my mouth. I'm not mad at my Sil because I know she was manipulated into doing this by my brother. I wish more people could understand that. Update 2. September 8, 2024. Update 2. SIL is now XSIL. I don't know if multiple updates are allowed for this sub. If not, take this down and I'll post to my profile. Some people were wondering what happened to my brother and Sil. Well, she dumped him. They tried to make it work, but that only lasted a few days and she ended up giving him the ring back. My brother got shit-faced drunk on my front lawn in the middle of the night. I was pissed because Lily had school the next morning and this woke her up. My brother was yelling insults to both me and my daughter. We called the police and he spent the night in jail for drunken disturbance. I believe the official charge was something like that. I sure as hell pressed charges because he was saying some borderline threatening statements to me and my daughter. I don't think it's enough to qualify for a restraining order, but if it is I'll get a temporary one. On a more positive note, Lily is doing well. She's getting straight A's in even subjects and is excited about her first ever science project. She's been talking my ear off about it. Send help LOL. Comments. Commenter 1, good for you and your daughter. That was such a violation for you too. Unfortunately the ex has to deal with her own personal demons. They are both sick. Commenter 2. It's unfortunate that your brother reacted so poorly to the breakup. It's great that you're prioritizing Lily's well-being and ensuring her safety. Hopefully your brother gets the help he needs to deal with his emotions in a healthier way. Dad gave our family business to my lazy brother. He messed up, almost causing a customer to die, and now Dad's begging me to come back and fix it. I, 28F, threw my dad a retirement party somewhat over a month ago. Having maintained our family restaurant for practically his whole life, he was retiring from management. Now, at about 62, he told us he was too exhausted to continue and wanted the company to be passed on to the next generation. Since I had given this restaurant the past 5 years of my life, I very mistakenly assumed he meant me. My family runs 2 other restaurants across the city in addition to an Italian franchise. My uncle runs one, the other is supervised by his daughter. But the most often used branch is ours, and my father is the official owner. For background, my uncle is not really the biological brother of Dad. This all began when my grandfather built his first restaurant, where business first started. Actually, our property is the original one. The restaurant my grandfather opened with my grandmother operated for numerous years until my father assumed control. Then he grew the company by adding 2 other eateries at separate sites. My uncle came in at that point. When we first launched the second restaurant, he left his employment and began working there. His daughter took charge of that place. Since the company has always stayed within the family, when Dad announced his retirement a few weeks before I hosted the celebration, I naturally anticipated him to turn it over to me. Since my uncle wanted to retire in a few years anyway and he is almost the same age as my father, maybe a few years younger, he was not a competitor for the firm. Given my 5-year dedication to the first restaurant, his daughter's 2 years of running the new store represent significantly less experience than I have. I abandoned my corporate job to work with my father ever since I was 23. I wanted to one day inherit the family firm and carry it to unprecedented success. Since I was the strongest applicant to inherit the company, I simply thought it would be me. My cousin was too young and unskilled to manage on her own. My uncle was retiring soon. I knew then it would be me. Though it was somewhat stupid of me not to demand a written agreement, my father never mentioned it straightforwardly. I assumed this was merely understood. Still, at the very last instant my father threw me a curveball. He said on the day of his retirement celebration that my bratty younger brother would be inheriting the company. I have a younger brother and an elder brother. Charles, 34M, my older brother, took the medical route. He is a surgeon and shows no enthusiasm for the restaurant industry. Derek, 26M, my younger brother, spends nothing at all and does nothing all day. Nobody in the family likes him, he is a brat of good value for nothing. Though I have no issue with his lack of talents or his lack of activity all day, I absolutely find his attitude unacceptable. Though he has nothing to show for his life, he behaves as though he is the best and deserves every nice thing that comes his way. Mostly, it's my parents pushing this behavior. Anytime Charles and I try to talk about it, they shut us down and tell us he needs positive support so he could investigate job paths and avoid lifetime freeloading dependent on his parents. A few years ago, he graduated from community college. Since then, he has been let go from at least 5 different companies. He has a major attitude issue so he can never make things stick. Though I'm not sure why he believes this, he feels he is on the same level as God personally and that nobody else can challenge him. We have to put up with it since we are family, but in the actual world, least of all his employers, none would accept this kind of behavior. It is therefore not surprising that he has been let off from every position within a few months. He is not very talented in anything, and even the jobs he worked at were guaranteed by my father via his contacts. For himself, Derek truly cannot accomplish anything. He is simply a huge screw-up and has no idea about his future direction. Since he was let go from his last job 2 years ago, he has been lounging about our house, draining our parents for the past several years. The worst aspect is his lack of any guilt or regret over it. Our parents ignore him and let him live this way instead of intervening, which makes it quite annoying. It is unfair, particularly because Charles and myself were continuously urging us to improve. Not to seem unappreciative, as Charles and I are doing in our life, but it stinks to see them be so forgiving of Derek. Still, I find him to be a somewhat spoiled brat that absolutely bothers me. As children, we were all wonderful friends. But, since high school, things have changed and I hardly get along with Derek in the least. Everyone was rather surprised when my dad said Derek would be inheriting the company as he also lacks knowledge of the company or any notion of how things run. A few months before I organized the celebration, my father had announced his retirement. Everyone knew about it. Family members as well as workers. Having been my father's right-hand man, or lady, in my case, I naturally anticipated to take over after he retired. I regret not having a decent discussion about it. I had taken it for granted, and perhaps that was the reason I came undone. I regarded this as evidence that he was intending to leave me in control, even though he had expressed things about what he wanted me to do once he retired a few times. I trusted my father, therefore I never thought of him maybe not leaving the company to me. He had never offered me a justification not to. Though he handled Derek differently, that did not mean he mistreated me. As an employee as well as a daughter, he was always incredibly caring and polite with me. Still, I decided to throw him a party when he announced his retirement. It never occurred to me that he hadn't revealed who his successor would be, since I simply knew it would be me. I was shocked on the day the party was scheduled when he chose to declare Derek would be taking charge. Not only me, everyone at the party, from my mother herself to all the staff, was in shock. Everyone had assumed I would inherit the company, particularly because I had spent 5 years working at the restaurant striving for perfection. Still, after all of my effort, Derek was scheduled to inherit. I found none of it logical. It didn't really dawn on me until my father brought Derek to his side and he smugly declared he embraced his new post. Tears and total devastation drove me literally from the restaurant. 2 minutes later, my father trailed me outdoors. He wants to clarify that he made this very tough choice for specific reasons. Though I was unhappy, I chose to give him some time. Still, his motives were equally illogical and foolish as his choice. He knew it. He informed me that Derek was really useless and that this affected his decision. Derek had been sitting at home for the past 2 years, while my father had been trying very hard to convince him to go out, hunt for a job, and engage in meaningful life activity. Derek took everything lightly. Now my father reasoned that perhaps placing Derek in a position requiring responsibility, such as running the restaurants, would compel him to rise up and improve his output. Derek's heart wasn't in it, according to my father, because he was working for someone else and lacked an interest in his former employment. However, my father thought Derek would have more of a stake and would be driven to be a better worker, since this would be his own business. And if not, at minimum, it would get him out of the home. Then my father informed me that he still wanted me at the restaurant to perform exactly what I used to do for Derek, to be always present for him. He informed me Derek would only be the nominal head. I would be the actual boss. This would, according to my father, inspire Derek to become well. To me, that was quite nasty. Knowing that I was quite capable of doing a far better job than Derek, he expected me to be his shadow and assistant always. I am my own person. I am not the babysitter for my brother. By then, I had worked hard enough to land the job my father had just given Derek. I was still rather offended and not changed even with the justification. I warned my dad he would lose me permanently, or he could undo his words and offer me the job he had just granted Derek. I meant it. I had an ultimatum to offer him. Regretfully, we then engaged in a somewhat nasty argument. He informed me I wasn't thinking about my brother's future and I was being selfish and irrational. By not considering mine, he was also acting selfishly, I told him. We found ourselves fighting in this way. Having nothing to say left, I cut him off after that. He refused to hand the job away from Derek to someone who rightly earned it, me. I made up my mind not to return to the restaurant after I felt so degraded. My last day spent there was the day following the retirement celebration. 1 month after that, I still haven't gone back to the restaurant. Though I don't ask about the business, I have stayed in contact with my mother and Charles. They know how things are going, but they also know it bothers me and I don't want to talk about it. I therefore had no idea how the restaurant was performing until a few days ago. Nothing had truly altered on that front as I stopped talking to my father following that argument and avoided Derek anyhow. After leaving the restaurant, I had also begun submitting applications for other employment. Like any other employee, I did get paid for my work there, and I have some money right now to cover temporary needs. I reasoned I could survive off of my funds till I discovered another activity I wanted to engage in. I had even intended to travel next week, but right now I'm not sure since I might have to return to the restaurant. The cause is, like I had anticipated, my brother messed up quite extensively. For some reason, my dad felt it would be a good idea to let him do anything he wanted, without supervision, to inspire confidence in him. He knew nothing about running a restaurant. Apparently, Derek's emotions came before the family business and other pragmatic issues. Derek had been cutting costs on components in addition to making a lot of careless and foolish financial mistakes from the beginning. Now, it's causing them major difficulties. We offer a separate vegan menu and accommodate vegans so that none of non-vegan items come into touch with vegan meals in the kitchen for ethical reasons. We also set aside space specifically for vegan cuisine cooking. But in his infinite wisdom, Derek closed that compartment to create room in the kitchen and began tampering vegan goods in order to save money. This would only be a matter of time before blowback occurred. 2 days ago, the unavoidable happened. Derek had told staff members to use conventional dairy milk wherever they could avoid using the more unsafe higher-priced soy milk. That moron overlooked the fact that some people are really allergic to dairy, not just vegan for fun. You might fairly predict what followed. A client ordered a milk-based dessert and expressly requested soy milk or another milk substitute to be used rather than ordinary dairy. Usually, one of our regular staff members would have used the alternative as asked and disregarded Derek's ludicrous orders. Regretfully, Derek had chosen a fresh, inexperienced man and given him rigorous instructions to document anyone in the kitchen defying his directions. Derek had discovered that the regular staff members were neglecting him since they were too quickly running out of substitute materials. He recruited this new guy as he wanted someone to spy for him. Sadly, this new employee ignored the customer's request and used conventional dairy milk for the dessert following Derek's directions exactly. He did a really poor job with it as well. Things went south rapidly, and the client experienced a strong allergic response. They now seem ready to sue the eatery. I know all of this since my dad contacted me in the evening a few days ago, the day the incident occurred, to let me know what happened. He looked to be panicking. He told me he had sacked Derek right away since he had no idea what Derek had been doing behind his back. He now asked me to return and rejoin him. He was presenting me with the job I had long sought. It was strange that my brother wanted me to come back now, having screwed up just as I had predicted. From the events of 1 month ago, I was still somewhat wounded and disturbed, hence on the phone I laughed heartily at their predicament. I informed him I never would be returning under any conditions. Just as he had embarrassed me at the retirement party, I said that should he truly want me to come back, I anticipated a public apology in front of the family and all the staff. Before handing me the job, I also wanted him to admit his errors and declare he had sacked Derek. Given what happened during the party, I do not believe I was asking for too much. My father's behaviors were just intolerable, and they had severely wounded me. Since now he was the one depending on me, I thought I was merely asking him to make things right. But my mother felt my requests were a bit excessive. During the phone call, even my father claimed he would not be doing any of it. The company was just as much mine as it was his, he informed me. He stated what I was asking of him was ridiculous and humiliating even though he acknowledged he might have made a mistake. So am I the asshole, AITA, for asking my father to publicly apologize if he wants me to rejoin the family company following the choice of my brother to inherit it over me? Update 1. Hi everyone who took the time to comment on my first post and provide suggestions and encouragement first. Thank you very much for your concern on this matter. It truly means a lot to me. Regarding what I decided to do, I gave it some thought over a few days and concluded I would be returning to the company. Though I had to set aside my pride, the decision wasn't simple as at the end of the day, I have spent 5 years of my life at that place. I want to be the one to drive the company ahead, hence nothing else can change that. Given that my dad won't be around permanently, I truly want to see it flourish rather than be closed down. As I have already said, Charles has no interest in the restaurant, and Derek obviously lacks the skills or ability to run a company of that kind. It thus has to be me. It merely does. My uncle and cousin, who oversee the other 2 branches, agreed I should return when I spoke with them. They think that the restaurant is properly mine, hence if my father is asking me to come back, I should put my past behind me and pursue what I love. To be honest, I would have preferred it if my father had publicly apologized, but I don't want to start a public celebration or gloat over Derek being right. That would not make me very happy as compared to the gratification the success of our restaurant will provide. I now understand I have to choose my battles and have opted to let this one pass for my own benefit. I chatted with Dad this morning. That was a highly civil and official exchange. Though we will talk about them eventually, we decided to temporarily keep our history apart for now. Right now, we provide the situation under current utmost attention. To negotiate and get a settlement, we have set up a meeting with our lawyers and the impacted consumer. Out of court, as she has been continuously tweeting about us on social media. She hasn't acquired much traction thus far, so we have been lucky. Nevertheless, this won't be the case for long, hence we must squish this before it becomes too huge. Update 2. After a lengthy period, yesterday I personally met my father. We met before our customers meeting, and one last time we spoke with our lawyer on everything. Seeing him after so long was odd since, 5 years ago, I had seen him practically daily. Until I actually saw him, I had no idea how much I missed him. Since our lawyer handled much of the conversation, we didn't interact much. We had to concentrate on that, but I could see there was still plenty we needed to talk about. Though later we will have to deal with everything, now was not the proper time. Neither has he brought up anything regarding the event from a month ago, nor has he adequately apologized to me. Still, between us things were friendly and civil, which was a comfort because this was our first in-person meeting following our major argument. Though I expected things to be strange, happily they were not. It had been some time, so my father requested me to come home to see my mum after the conference. Since the retirement party, I have not visited home. I had to turn down though, since I had a prior obligation, that of attending an evening engagement party for a buddy. Fascinatingly, when I questioned my dad whether Derek lived at home, he informed me he did not. I really wanted to know where Derek was living and how it came about, but my dad didn't provide any more information and made it plain he didn't want to talk about it. So I stopped there. Later on I spoke with Charles and he informed me that Derek had moved out a few days following his termination, but he was unsure whether our parents had requested him to leave or whether Derek went on his own. Though things remain unknown, I intend to discuss it with my dad and work out what is happening. The client's meeting turned out better than anticipated. Given the situation, I had thought it would be difficult. What transpired was a major ethical transgression and never would have happened if my father or I had been in charge. The consumer, however, was reasonable. She said that the reason she had threatened to sue and complain so much on social media was that the manager had insisted that she was at fault rather than owning the error. She had, he said, not mentioned her dairy allergy or asked for soy milk. The fact that she was blamed when she knew it was not her fault infuriated her the most. Once we knew the whole truth, we knew how much of a moron Derek had been. The client had refused to interact with us prior to this without her lawyer present. She had stated in her social media posts how the management of the restaurant treated her, but she had not gone into great detail since she feared defamation claims. She hadn't completely explained the matter because Derek had got in touch with her accusing her of lying and threatening to sue her. Until now, my dad and I had not known exactly what transpired. The waiter who ordered her sided with Derek since he feared losing his employment. I don't blame him, even if it means covering for their company. These folks need their jobs and are not ready to jeopardize them. Derek, the new guy he hired, never turned on him, hence he also insisted that the server had not been told about the soy milk, which resulted in the ordinary dairy milk being used. Then Derek and the new guy claimed the customer was trying to obtain money from us and lying to discredit the business. We told the client that Derek, the guy in charge, had been let go. So right now, we were running everything ourselves. Nothing like this will never ever happen again, we assured her. Fortunately, we reached an understanding. She agreed to remove her social media entries and let it go. Although we lost quite a lot of money in the process, at least we were able to tidy Derek's mess. My dad and I can at last relax. Update 3. Hi, I have never been happy. I returned to the restaurant a month ago. To be honest, it took me some time to see how unhappy I had been absent from the workplace. Though I have problems with my father, I love this place. I am going to soar to new heights as I wish. Regarding my father, we are working things out and have come quite far. Having spoken with my parents, we as a family have decided we should spend more time together. A few weeks back, after returning to the restaurant, I had a lengthy conversation with my dad. He and my mother said they handled Charles and me poorly. They wanted to develop Derek to a point where he could compete with us and not feel inadequate. They knew he was the weakest link among us. But they raised his ego to an irrational level in doing this. Now, Derek sees the world of himself without really trying to get better. The day my father dismissed him, Derek moved out and shut everyone off since his pride suffered. Later, my dad discovered Derek is working at a nearby video game store and living with a friend. At least he's trying to make it on his own and acting. It's good for him. Every weekend my family gathers for dinner, including Charles and his wife. Derek has been invited multiple times. It would be disrespectful not to, but he has not responded, as asked. It scarcely counts to me since I have nothing to do with him anymore. Though I would like him in my life, I wish him the best. For me, hanging around with my family has been fantastic. I adore it since my father and I are at last returning to a state of normality. Recently, life has been very wonderful. I have no complaints. At last I am creating something I believe in and doing what I love. I am back on good terms with my family and I do not think I could ask for more. All a person truly needs to be happy is that. My son tried to kick me out of my home to finance his dream house and start his own family. I am a 65M single parent having spent the past 32 years alone. Laura, my wife, died while our son Gary was just 3 years old. She got in an automobile accident on her way home from work, hence the loss was abrupt and terrible. We were a happy family of 3 one minute, then I was left to raise our small kid by myself. Early on those years were really demanding. At the time, I was a high school English teacher and suddenly I had to balance my employment with full-time parent duties. On evenings when I would sit on Gary's room's floor observing him sleep, I would wonder how I would handle it all. Still, we managed daily to make it work. Over the years, I gave up a great deal. Promotions that would have needed more travel or longer hours declined. Gary always came first, so I missed out on social events and dating possibilities. I never, however, objected to it. Gary was my universe. Seeing him develop into a content, healthy young man made all the difference. Things grew simpler in some respects and more difficult in others as Gary aged. While the emotional obstacles of parenting a child were more pronounced, the practical ones became lessened. Gary began to probe his mother more, and I tried to preserve her memory for him. Together, we would review picture albums and I would share anecdotes about her. Though it was complicated, I wanted him to know how much Mom had loved him. Gary and I had a wonderful connection in spite of the obstacles. We were great buddies, not only father and son. We both loved sports, especially baseball, and some of my best recollections are of Gary being taught to throw in our backyard. We used weekends for hiking or camping as he grew older. When Gary was admitted into a decent college, I felt really proud. Watching him pack for his dorm room was mixed, but I was happy for him to begin this next phase of his life. Over his college years, we kept in close proximity. I loved those talks as he would call me for guidance on everything from his studies to girl problems. Gary returned home after college in search of work. He ran across Jane during this period. She came from a rich background, was clever and attractive. Though at first I was glad Gary had discovered someone who brought him great delight, over time I began to see changes in his conduct. Always talking about the beautiful places Jane took him to or the costly gifts her parents bought, he grew increasingly preoccupied with worldly objects. Reminding myself that Gary was a mature man entitled to live his life any way he wanted, I tried not to let it disturb me. But the sensation that he was transforming into someone I didn't know persisted. Though I had reservations, I was glad for Gary and Jane when they declared they were getting married. Though Gary insisted Jane's parents were paying for everything, I volunteered to assist with wedding expenses. The wedding was an opulent event considerably more grand than anything our family was accustomed to. Among Jane's friends and family, I felt awkward. Yet I put up a courageous front for Gary's benefit. Gary and Jane moved into a lovely property in an affluent area following the wedding. That was quite different from the little house Gary had grown up in. Occasionally I was asked there for supper, but in their contemporary house I always felt like an outsider. Jane was courteous but aloof, and I sensed she considered me as embarrassing. Gary disappeared from my view as the years passed. His high-powered career and new way of life occupied him. Our talks felt surface level. Although I missed my kid, I reminded myself that this was inevitable in raising a new family. Then around 6 months ago, I decided to do something that would fundamentally alter everything. I choose to call it quits on instruction. After 40 years in the classroom, I thought it was time. I was 65. Having extra free time excited me, maybe for vacation or a new hobby pickup. Gary's response when I informed him I wanted to retire startled me. He appeared worried rather than delighted for me. Inquiring about my financial condition, he wanted to know whether I had enough stored up. I reassured him that throughout the years I had been frugal with my money and had a reasonable pension. Though I wasn't wealthy by any means, I had enough to live reasonably. Gary advised me then to sell my house and live with Jane and him. The proposition immediately appealed to me. It seemed to me as evidence that Gary wanted to reconnect and have me play a more major role in his life once more. Then he began discussing the value of my house and how the sales proceeds would benefit us all. I liked my house. It was where Gary had grown up and where we had created many treasured memories. I never gave it any thought. I told Gary I was glad where I was, even though I appreciated the offer. Though he appeared let down, he avoided raising the matter. Gary began phoning more regularly over the next 2 weeks. Every time he would bring up my selling the house notion. He discussed how I might help them at home and how everyone would benefit from it. His tenacity began to irritate me. Then, about a month after I retired, Gary and Jane showed up at my place without warning. They claimed to want to discuss my housing circumstances. Jane spoke much of the time, outlining their intended family starting point and how great it would be to have me there to assist with the grandchildren. Her voice, though, seemed strange. She seemed to be pitching me something. It was obvious as the discussion progressed what they truly desired. Though they needed more money for the down payment, they were looking at a larger house in an even more upscale area. They reasoned that if I sold my house and lived with them, I could put the money toward their new house. I would have a room in their house in exchange and live among their family. Using the promise of family intimacy to gain my money, They seemed to be trying to control me. I told them straight out I had no intention of investing in theirs or selling my house. Gary was irate, but Jane remained calm and said they were simply trying to support me. I shook when they went. My kid, the small lad I had reared on my own, would try to pressure me in this way, and I couldn't believe it. Over the next few days, I considered our relationship and sought to identify when things had gone so wrong. 1 week later, Gary gave a call. This time his voice was different. He claimed they had no option but to handle things as I was not ready to be sensible. He told me the house I was living in belonged really to him. I remembered putting the house in both our names when Gary turned 18, even though I had bought it when he was a small boy. Never expecting he would turn it against me, I saw it as a means of ensuring his future. Gary claimed to be co-owner and intended to sell the house as he was entitled to do so. What I was hearing, my own kid was threatening to sell the roof over my head, wrangled me. Saying that this was my house, I objected and Gary said, "You're retired now, Dad. You simply are an old useless man. We have a future to consider, Jane and I." The next several weeks were a misery. Beginning to show real estate brokers, Gary and Jane insisted on offering house tours. They dismissed my objections, as though I were not even here. Watching strangers move through my own house, I felt like a ghost. I once listened in the kitchen as Jane spoke with Gary. She didn't know I was in the room next door. "We have to clear the useless old bones from here," she remarked. "I find it amazing that you let him freeload for so long." Gary's answer was just as nasty. "Don't worry, we will have him gone shortly. He has had his time, now it is ours." I collapsed. For now the son I had given everything saw me as nothing more than a burden. Lost and alone, I didn't know what to do going forward. That's where I find myself right now. My son and daughter-in-law are aggressively trying to sell my house out from under me. They have made it abundantly evident that they consider me as nothing more than a worthless old bone getting in the way of their ambitions. About my future, I'm frightened, angry and wounded. At 65, I never thought I would be in this situation facing possible homelessness from the avarice of my own child. How did my relationship with my son get here? Update 1. It's been a month since I last posted and I can't believe how much has transpired. The issue with Gary and Jane has only worsened, and I find myself in a position I never imagined conceivable. Following my initial post, I resolved to take action. I couldn't simply sit back and let Gary and Jane sell my house from beneath me. I contacted an old friend, Dean, who is a lawyer. I've known Dean since college, and he's always been there for me. When I explained the problem, he was outraged and offered to assist me pro gratis. Dean investigated the legal issues of my circumstance. It turns out that, while Gary's name appears on the deed, there are regulations that protect me as a long-term resident. Dean stated that Gary could not simply force me out or sell the house without my approval. This gave me a little sense of relief, but I knew the war wasn't done. I've decided to confront Gary and Jane. I asked them over for supper, expecting that in a quiet, familiar setting, we could have a logical conversation. I spent the entire day preparing Gary's favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings. It was the same dish I made for his birthday every year as he grew up. When they arrived, we sat down to eat, and it felt nearly like old times. We exchanged casual conversation regarding work and weather. I finally decided it was time to confront the elephant in the room. I informed them about my conversation with Dean. I stated that what they were attempting to do was not only ethically reprehensible, but potentially unlawful. I hoped that the knowledge would cause them to reconsider their actions. Gary's reply did not meet my expectations. Instead of backing down, he became infuriated. He accused me of threatening him and attempting to influence him using legal jargon that I did not understand. Jane jumped in, stating I was selfish and jeopardizing their future. I tried to remain cool, explaining that I was not threatening anyone. I just wanted to keep my house, where I had raised Gary and where we had shared so many memories. However, my comments appeared to go unheard. After dinner, Gary and Jane stormed out, leaving me alone with a table full of half-eaten food. I spent the night reading through old photo albums, looking at images of Gary as he grew up. I couldn't connect the happy youngster in those images with the man attempting to take away my home. The next day, I received a letter from the law company that represents Gary and Jane. They were disputing my right to stay in the residence, saying that Gary, as co-owner, had the authority to sell. The letter was full of legal jargon that I didn't understand, but the message was clear: they were willing to take this to court. I quickly called Dean. He calmed me, but told me that court battles may be exhausting, both emotionally and financially. He warned me to be ready for a tough struggle. Over the next 3 weeks, my life was occupied by legal consultations and paperwork. Dean was quite helpful, explaining everything in language I could understand and guiding me through the process, but it was exhausting. I couldn't sleep because I was so scared about what was about to happen. During this time, I also began reaching out to old acquaintances and coworkers. I hadn't realized how secluded I'd been in recent years, focusing solely on Gary and his family. It was a relief to reconnect with individuals who knew me and recalled what a good parent I had been to Gary. One of these individuals, my former coworker Susan, promised to let me stay with her if things became really terrible. It was comforting to know I had somewhere to go if the worst happened, but the prospect of leaving my home shattered my heart. As the legal battle progressed, Gary and Jane's methods became increasingly aggressive. They began spreading stories across the neighborhood that I was mentally ill and needed to be placed in a care facility. Some neighbors I'd known for years began avoiding me, giving me weird stares as we passed on the street. Stress was having a toll on my health. I found myself always weary and lost my appetite. My doctor warned me about the consequences of stress at my age and recommended some sleep aids, but medications couldn't relieve the agony in my heart that accompanied every thought of Gary. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and I had an unexpected visitor. It was Jane's mother, Elizabeth. I had only met her a few times at family gatherings, and we had never been close. She appeared embarrassed as she stood on my porch, but I politely invited her in. Over a cup of tea, Elizabeth explained why she had come. She had overheard Gary and Jane discussing their plans and was appalled. She told me that she and her husband had no idea what Gary and Jane were doing and did not agree. Elizabeth apologized for her daughter's actions and offered to help in any way she could. After everything that had transpired, it was difficult to trust anyone connected to Gary and Jane, but as we spoke, I could tell Elizabeth was genuinely distressed about the situation. She told anecdotes about her own father, who had lived with her in his latter years. She couldn't imagine treating a parent the same way Gary and Jane treated me. Before she went, Elizabeth handed me an envelope. There was a large check inside. She encouraged me to accept it, stating it would help with legal bills or whatever else I needed. I was astonished by her generosity and attempted to reject it, but she wouldn't have it. She made me promise that I would let her know if I needed anything else. It was good to hear that not everyone in Gary's new family agreed with his conduct, but it also made me sad to think that my son's in-laws were treating me better than he was. The court battle dragged on. Gary and Jane's lawyers were aggressive, launching every legal argument they could think of at us. Dean was doing a wonderful job of defending me, but the constant back and forth was exhausting. On a particularly rough day, I found myself sitting in the garden, gazing at the old treehouse Gary and I had built together when he was 10. It was aged and faded, but still standing. I remembered the summer we spent building it, Gary's delight as we pounded each nail, and the pride in his eyes when we were done. Now that same boy was attempting to take away the house where we had shared so many good memories. As I sat there, deep in meditation, my phone vibrated with a text. It came from Gary, our first direct communication in weeks. The message was quick and cold. Dad, this is your final opportunity. Agree to sell your house and move in with us, or we'll make sure you get nothing. This was not the son I had reared. The Gary I knew would never have threatened his own father in this way. I did not respond to the text, but I did keep it. Dean had told me to keep track of all communication between Gary and Jane. The next day, I had a meeting set with Dean to discuss our future strategy. As I was about to depart, I heard a disturbance outside. I peeked out the window and saw Gary and Jane in the front yard, supervising a crew of workers putting up a for sale sign. I raced outdoors, wanting to know what was going on. Gary claimed they were simply prepared for the inevitable. I informed them they had no right to put up a sign because the house was not for sale. Jane laughed and replied, "It will be soon enough, old man." I stood there helplessly, watching the workers finish putting up the sign. Neighbors started to emerge from their homes, curious about the disturbance. That night, I was unable to sleep. I continued repeating the day's events in my head, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. I found myself thinking about Laura and what she would say if she could see what our boy had become. The next morning, I awoke to see my front yard packed with people. Gary and Jane had arranged an open house without my knowledge or consent. Potential buyers were roaming through my house, inspecting my belongings as if I weren't even present. I was infuriated. I called Dean immediately, and he encouraged me to capture everything. So I started filming and photographing the guests in my house, making sure to capture Gary and Jane's features properly. Some of the potential purchasers became uneasy when they realized I was the homeowner and had not authorized this open house. As the day progressed, more and more people showed up. Gary and Jane were excellent guests, taking people around my property and pointing out highlights as if they had the authority to market it. I overheard Jane informing one couple that they were assisting her poor, bewildered father-in-law in making the transfer to assisted living. The brazen deception infuriated me. I attempted to speak with some of the possible purchasers to explain the issue, but Gary and Jane kept interrupting me and guiding people away. At one point, Gary told someone that I was not quite right in the head. By the end of the day, I was both exhausted and heartbroken. After the last potential buyer had left, Gary and Jane remained, apparently satisfied with themselves. Gary had the arrogance to tell me that the open house was a huge success, with several interested parties. He told me I should start packing my belongings. I could not handle it anymore. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt spilled forth. I told Gary just how I felt about him. How selfish and greedy he'd become. I reminded him of all the sacrifices I had made and the love I had shown him. I questioned him how he could do this to me, in remembrance of his mother. For a brief moment I thought I saw a glimpse of the old Gary in his eyes, but when Jane murmured something in his ear, his countenance hardened. He said I was living in the past and needed to recognize that things had changed. They then went, leaving me alone in the house, which no longer seemed like home. That night I reached a choice. I couldn't keep living this way, always on edge, waiting for the next thing to happen. I needed to gain control of the situation. I called Dean and informed him that I wanted to pursue more aggressive legal action. He cautioned me that things may get ugly, that Gary and Jane might retaliate even more harshly, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to fight for my home and my dignity. The following few weeks were filled with legal meetings and court appearances. Gary and Jane's lawyers threw everything they could at us, but Dean was great. He produced evidence of their harassment, including video footage from the unauthorized open house. He battled over my rights as a long-term resident and co-owner of the property. Throughout it all, Gary and Jane sat in the courtroom, chatting to each other and their lawyers while rarely glancing at me. It was as if they no longer saw me as a person, but as a barrier to be overcome. The stress of the legal struggle was getting to me. I lost weight and had difficulty sleeping. My doctor was concerned about my blood pressure and emphasized the significance of attempting to remain calm. But how could I remain calm while my own son attempted to make me homeless? As the court case reached its conclusion, I had another unexpected visit, this time from Jane's father, Robert. He, like his wife, appeared uneasy as he stood on my porch. I allowed him in, wondering what had brought him here. Robert was straightforward. He informed me that he was ashamed of his daughter's actions and disappointed in Gary. He claimed that he and Elizabeth had raised Jane to be better than this and couldn't understand what had changed her. Then Robert did something unexpected. He offered to buy out Gary and Jane's half of my house. He stated he couldn't stand by while they destroyed our family for money. His offer startled me, and I had no idea how to answer. Robert assured me that this was not charity. He said that he and Elizabeth had already planned to make Jane and Gary a hefty down payment on a new house. Instead, they planned to use the money to buy out Gary's part in my residence. This manner, I could stay in my home while Gary and Jane received the money they desired. Robert's kindness surpassed my expectations. It appeared too good to be true, the ideal solution to this misery. However, I was also suspicious. I'd been hurt too many times in the previous months to trust lightly. I told Robert that I needed time to consider his offer and discuss it with my lawyer. He understood and handed me his card, asking me to phone him when I had made a decision. The next morning, I called Dean and informed him of Robert's offer. He cautioned me to tread cautiously. We agreed to meet with Robert to discuss the details. The meeting was held in the dean's office a few days later. Robert brought his own lawyer, and we spent hours discussing the details of the proposition. By the end of the meeting, we had reached an arrangement that appeared fair to all. Under the terms of the agreement, Robert would buy out Gary's part in the house, giving him and Jane the funds they needed for their new home. In exchange, I would maintain full ownership of my home. Of course, there were some conditions. I had to commit not to sell the house for at least 5 years, and if I did decide to sell later, Gary and Jane would have first refusal. It wasn't a flawless solution, but it was better than I could have expected. I would keep my home, while Gary and Jane would receive their money. Maybe, I thought, this will be the end of the war. I should have known better. When Gary and Jane learned about the arrangement, they were enraged. They accused Robert and Elizabeth of interfering, siding with me against their own daughter. Gary called me, raving about how I had turned his in-laws against him. I tried to explain that this was a fantastic solution for everyone and that they were still receiving what they wanted, but Gary refused to listen. He claimed I poisoned Jane's parents against them and was manipulating everyone. Gary closed our talk by informing me he never wanted to see me again. He stated that he no longer regarded himself as having a father. These comments wound worse than everything else that had transpired. Despite Gary and Jane's misgivings, the transaction went through. Robert bought out Gary's part in the house, making me the only owner. The legal proceedings had been concluded and the for sale sign had been taken from my front yard. In the weeks that followed, I attempted to return to normal. I started taking better care of myself, eating correctly and exercising. I heard through the grapevine that Gary and Jane had purchased their dream home in the exclusive community they'd been looking at. I wondered if they were content, if the money and the large house were worth everything they'd done to obtain them. As the months went, I gradually came to terms with everything. Final update. It's been a while, about 2 years after the court struggle finished. One day, I got an unexpected delivery in the mail. It came from Jane's parents, Robert and Elizabeth. The contents included a photo album and a letter. The letter mentioned that they had been browsing through old family photos and discovered several pictures of Gary from various family occasions throughout the years. They thought I'd want to have them. It was a wonderful gesture that I greatly appreciated. The last page of the album had a surprise. A recent photo of Gary and Jane posing in front of their new home showed Jane holding a little placard that read "Baby on board." They were planning to become parents. I sat there for a long time, staring at the photograph. I was about to become a grandfather. It was something I had fantasized about for years, teaching my grandchildren to play catch or telling them goodnight stories. Now it was happening, but I didn't know if I'd ever get to meet this youngster. That night, I wrote Gary a note. I obtained their address from the return label. In the letter, I congratulated him on the baby and expressed my happiness for him. I told him I understood if he didn't want me in his life, but I hoped we could reconcile someday. I told him I loved him and would always love him, no matter what happened. I mailed the letter the next day, not anticipating any reaction. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing. I tried to put it out of my mind and concentrate on the positive things in my life, but I couldn't stop thinking about Gary and the baby. Then, around 8 months after I submitted the letter, I was outside watering my flowers when a car pulled up. To my surprise, Gary exited. He looked different, older and more serious. He stood there for a bit, simply looking at me, before approaching and hugging me without saying anything. It was strange at first, but I could feel him relax, so I hugged back. We remained there for a moment, neither speaking. Gary's eyes welled up with emotions as we parted ways. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I'm so sorry." We stepped inside and Gary shared his heart over cups of coffee. He told me how ashamed he was of his actions, and how the burden of trying to fit into Jane's environment had shifted his focus. He claimed that being a father made him understand how badly he had treated me. Gary stated that he and Jane had been going through some difficult times, the stress of the new house, the baby on the way, and the guilt over what they'd done to me had all put a strain on their relationship. They'd started couples counseling, which had helped Gary see how far he'd wandered from the ideals I'd instilled in him. I listened to Gary's apology and explanation. As he spoke, I saw the guy I'd raised, the gentle, sensitive son who had been my best friend for so many years. But I could see changes in him. He was more mature and mindful of the implications of his behavior. Gary informed me about the baby, a young girl due in a few months. He explained that he and Jane had done a lot of thinking and wanted me to be a part of their child's life. I was moved by the offer, but I made it clear that things could not simply return to normal. Too much had occurred. There had been too many harsh words and actions. If we were to continue our relationship, we needed to agree on new conditions. Gary understood. He advised we start slowly, perhaps meeting for coffee once a week, and gradually restore our friendship. I agreed. As Gary was leaving, he paused at the door. "Dad," he began, "I know I have no right to ask, but would you consider being present when the baby is born? I really want my daughter to meet her grandfather." The request astonished me and left me feeling conflicted. I wanted nothing more than to be present for my granddaughter's birth, but should I trust Gary and Jane? Finally, I told Gary I would think about it. He nodded, acknowledging my hesitation. Over the next 2 months, Gary and I met for coffee on a regular basis, occasionally with Jane. These sessions were frequently awkward at first, as we all danced around the elephant in the room. However, we gradually began to ease around each other. Jane apologized for her role in what had occurred. She added that she had felt a lot of pressure from her parents to marry up and provide a specific lifestyle. She'd become engrossed with materialism and lost sight of what was truly important. Pregnancy had also served as a wake-up call for her. I appreciated Jane's apologies, but as with Gary, I made it plain that re-establishing trust would take time. She seems to understand and respect my boundaries. Gary called me 2 weeks before the due date, panicked. Jane had gone into labor early and was on her way to the hospital. I did not hesitate to meet him there. I spent the following few hours pacing the hospital waiting room. Gary came out at regular intervals to provide me with updates. After what felt like a lifetime, Gary emerged with a big smile on his face. "Dad, do you want to meet your granddaughter?" I followed Gary inside the room. Jane was in bed, fatigued but delighted, holding the tiniest, most precious little bundle I'd ever seen. Gary carefully removed the baby from Jane and delivered her to me. "Dad, meet Lily Laura." My granddaughter was stunning when I first held her. Her middle name is Laura, which is the name of my late wife. I looked at Gary and questioned him. He cracked a grin and continued. "We wanted her to have a piece of grandma, to honor the amazing parents who raised me." Over the next few months, I spent as much time as possible with Lily. Gary and Jane were fantastic in incorporating me into her life. My friendship with Gary and Jane also improved. We talked more honestly about what had happened and worked through our concerns. So that is it, Reddit. That is my experience over the last 2 years. I appreciate all of the helpful suggestions you've given me, but it's time for me to quit writing and spend more time with my family. I punched an autistic kid after he groped me and now everyone hates me. Am I the jerk? That grope was the last straw. I have known Troy since nursery, kindergarten for Americans, or just anyone, and he has always been a baby. It was always his autism that made him who he was. I don't know why, but he always had a crush on me. I rejected him gently multiple times, but he never took no for an answer. As we grew older, he got worse. He started commenting on my chest. Asking to touch them. Asking to see them. His friends kept trying to convince me to show him because nobody would be nice enough to give him a chance. And in year 7, 6th grade, he started groping me. I told teachers, but they kept saying that his autism doesn't make him know any better. It was only me. He got jealous when I was in the presence of another guy. He would have meltdowns and I got into trouble because I knew how upset he would get. No, I didn't. It was like my only purpose was to be his. I wasn't allowed to be my own person. The groping continued. I kept telling him to stop. He didn't listen. I remember crying on the floor and teachers just kept saying that his autism makes him like this and that I'm being a good person by taking care of him. His groping hurt. I don't know how to explain it. He just grabbed my chest and butt hard. And it hurts. The groping continued for 4 years. I was always his caretaker, his girlfriend, his best friend, his. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. It was hot and I wore a skirt and he proceeded to put his hands up my skirt and groped my butt. I lost it and punched him around the nose. His nose got broken and unfortunately now I am getting put into isolation for 2 months for bullying an autistic kid. He's not a kid though. He's 16 years old. He acts normal around his friends. He treats everyone else with respect. He's not a kid. Now everyone hates me. I have been receiving death threats and people have been saying he should have done worse. Now all I want to do is curl up and die. Maybe I should have been nicer. Maybe I should have been more sympathetic. Maybe I should have just accepted it. I could have been his only chance. For the record, I don't despise autistic people. He is not a representative of them. He is just an awful person. Troy is just a horrible person. Thank you for letting me vent. Edit. Hi all. I didn't expect so much attention, so thank you for the validation. Giving my context. His parents are prominent people in our community. His dad is a third-generation Army something, IDK, and his mom is known for always holding all of the stuff for kids. Like the summer fairs, etc. She is also part of the school board and friends with the higher-ups, if you will, which is why this happened at all. I wasn't technically his caretaker because I didn't have to feed him, clothe him, etc. I just had to be his friend. His dad is also friends with the police station. They go way back, so that's another reason why they didn't do much. Or just took a statement then wrote him off as mentally disabled. And the police here just suck ass here. Police officers have essayed many women before here. They just get let off. Unfortunately, onto a semi-update. Firstly, my parents will look into lawyers. We just couldn't afford one, and I was always too scared to get one. I guess it was because I have been so neglected, that I just thought nobody would believe me. However, my other relatives said that they would chip in and pay for a good lawyer. Meanwhile, my parents took me out of the school and I will stay at my grandma's for a while to recover. My auntie is also going to pay for my therapy. So I will enjoy that much needed therapy. Thank you so much for the kind words. I hope you all miraculously wake up with more money in your bank's accounts than you expected. Edit 2. Hi all, I didn't expect this story to end up on TikTok so quickly. I would like to thank you all again for your words and thank you so much to those who have been reaching out to me. It means a lot. I would also like to point out that this is a throwaway account, and I want to stay anonymous. But thank you all so much again for the kind words and comments. I realize that I was never in the wrong. That I am a person. Thank you. I truly hope you all have the best days ever. You all are amazing. Relevant comments from OOP. Comment 1. Is the kid cognitively challenged? OP, nope, he has mild autism, if that makes sense. He's actually quite good around people. Just not me. IG. Comment 2. I would get law enforcement involved. OP, we tried to. They just didn't care because he is mentally challenged. My parents genuinely tried to do something, but when everyone defends him, they believe the majority. I mean, when I usually say this story, people automatically think I hate autistic people. I don't. Because autistic people don't do this. Horrible people do. Autism isn't the label for assault, the label is sexual assaulter. Update. Firstly, I would like to thank you all so much for your kind words and messages. Thank you for your support and validation, your words meant so much to me. Also, I thought I would explain the whole "I hope you all miraculously wake up with more money in your bank account" comment. I heard someone in TikTok say this and thought it would be a nice thing to say, as some people did question it in my messages. But yeah, thank you all again. Before this update starts, I would like to say that this all occurred like 2 weeks ago now. I just reached my breaking point and needed to vent. Hence why the update may be soon to some. This won't be the final update, but an update. I would also like to clear the air with my parents. Now, unfortunately, my parents come from a country where this stuff is normal. Not only that, but I am partially to blame, as I didn't say anything. Eventually I did tell them and they tried their best to help me. But they didn't know how. Though I do acknowledge their efforts, I am still going to be taking time to heal from them as well. My entire family also had a go at them and expressed their disappointment. The best thing for now is for me to spend some time apart from them. So to begin, I left the school. After my parents had heard that I got into trouble seriously because of Troy again, they basically thought it was time to pull me out. I am due to start my new school in 2 weeks. I have also been trying to settle at my grandma's house, as I just needed a fresh start with fresh people. To be honest, I have never felt so free. I have had to deal with that torment for years and years. So now I can enjoy the pleasure of walking home and not seeing him or bumping into him. So I feel great. On to the serious stuff. As I had mentioned, my family basically decided to pay for a lawyer, and we are now hoping to have a lawsuit against basically everyone involved. My grandma also had a go, to put nicely, with the school's board for basically allowing nepotism to harass other girls. She called all of the teachers a disgrace for endangering not only me but other people, and saying how none of the teachers who allowed this deserved to even step foot into a school. This experience has also not been all sunshines and daisies. After the suit was claimed or made, IDK, my parents got letters and messages basically asking for the case to be dropped. My parents obviously said no. But it still didn't stop the harassment. I eventually got harassed too. All of the people giving me death threats decided to go into graphic detail on what Troy wanted to do to me. Spoiler, it wasn't great. And Troy's parents showed up on my doorstep demanding to see me and talk to me, and how Troy is ready to apologize. Thankfully by then my uncle and I had been on the way to my grandma's house. However, my parents obviously didn't let them in regardless, and said that if they wanted to communicate, it had to be through a lawyer. The harassment didn't stop. And eventually Troy sent me a message on a burner account detailing all of the things he was going to do if got the opportunity to, and that I should be grateful that I managed to walk away with just a groping. Troy also kept spewing on about how I'm nothing but a whore or slut, etc. And I should be grateful that someone so popular even looked my way. He kept saying how if I had just let him fuck me, he wouldn't have groped me. However, I know if I did that I would no longer be myself. I would be his property forever. The thought of that makes me want to vomit. Also, his logic doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, I just got receipts and blocked him. I also asked my parents to help me change my number. And I did. My grandma, being the person she is, decided that wasn't good enough and got me a whole new phone. She claims it's compensation for my trauma. Thanks, Grandma. I am starting therapy the day after tomorrow, and I am hoping to start family therapy in August, as, truthfully, I don't know if I'm mad at my parents or should be mad. Like, is it my fault for not saying anything? But that's all the update I can give you for now. The lawsuit will be a whole other process, and hopefully if I remember I can update you all again. Thank you so much for your words. I truly appreciate all of you. I hope this update is clear enough for you, and apologies if you made it this far. My autistic brother spent over £400 of my hard-earned money on Lego, and my mum supports this. I, 14, have a brother 16 who has autism, and I just can't stand it anymore. Before you go and make assumptions, let me get this out of the way. He's not like the autistic people you see on the news or online. He's a perfectly functional, intelligent person. However, he becomes violent when he doesn't get his way, and his brain doesn't get toilet messages, regularly pisses, shits himself. The thing with him is, these things only happen at home. Anywhere else, he doesn't have any problems with accidents in his pants. What happened today drove me over the edge to the point of writing this. For context, here is the usual routine. I woke up to him on my bed hitting me repeatedly. My parents are downstairs making breakfast, oblivious to this. He won't stop, so I shout for my mom. She comes upstairs, gets him off me by rewarding him with chocolate, and proceeds to yell at me for shouting at her, and confiscate my electronics for an hour. When I get home from school, all is fine. I do some homework and go on the Xbox. After around 30 minutes on the Xbox, he does the same thing. Hits me over and over, leaving me with no choice but to call for my mom. She again rewards him for stopping, before proceeding to tell me off, and confiscate my electronics for the rest of the day. I'm writing this with the phone one of my friends bought for me, which I keep under my bed, as this is the only way I get to use technology for over 40 minutes a day. A reminder that this is the daily routine and has been occurring for at least 5 years. However, what happened today was even worse. He'd seen a Lego set that he wanted and beat me up until he got it. I shouted for my mom, but this time, she did something different. She let him order all the Lego he wanted, from my debit card. I've been saving up doing my paper round for 2 years to buy a PC, and he just blew 400 pounds of my money on Lego. I hate this. I hate my life. It feels like I'm only living to suffer. This post is purely me venting, and will likely not go anywhere, but I don't care. With all that said, is there anything I can do about this? I'm a minor in the UK if that helps. TLDR, my autistic brother spent over 400 pounds of my hard-earned money on Lego, and my mum supports this edit. Thanks for all the supportive comments. I didn't think anyone would care. Edit 2, 2,000 upvotes. You guys are insane. I didn't think anyone would care about this, but obviously you guys do. I'm writing an update to answer some of your questions, and explain my next moves. Again, thank you all so much for all of the support. Update. First, I just want to say thank you. Thank you all so much for all the support on the original post and all of your ideas in the comments. I tried to reply to every comment, but there are so many that I can't do that, although I do read them all. Second, I want to do a quick FAQ as many comments are asking the same thing. So here goes. Move in with another family member, tell another family member. They all live 100 plus miles away and don't believe that it's serious. You can get your money back as you're the cardholder. Nope, I need a legal guardian to go into the bank with me to do that. And finally, hit him back. I am a weak, 5 foot tall 14-year-old. He is a strong, 6 foot tall 16-year-old. This would cause more harm to me because he would attack back harder, and my mum would punish me more. Next, to the people who have offered me money in PMs and the comments. Thank you all so much for the offer, but I'm not going to accept anything. As I've come to realize, the assault is far more serious than the money at the end of the day. Finally, on to my plan. After reading literally 100s of comments, I've decided that the best course of action is to leg it out of school to the police station on Wednesday, and show them my collected video evidence, and the bruises on my arms. Again, thank you all so much for your advice. Please let me know if this is what I should do or if there's a better alternative. Edit. Just got 3 videos of this story in a row on TikTok. That's absolutely crazy. I found a tampon in my husband's car and another in our bedroom. Our youngster suddenly got new clothes that I didn't buy, so I assumed he was cheating. For 7 years, married for 4, I, 29F, have been with my spouse, 30M. I have never had cause to fear he was even slightly unhappy with our marriage or even disloyal to me. He enjoys making jokes about us still experiencing the honeymoon phase with 2 children in tow almost 5 years. Had it not for the shocking discovery in his car last month, I would not have questioned it or him. I saw something slatted between the cushions when buckling our daughter into her car seat. Pulling it out, I found it to be a tampon. Had I not had an IUD stopping my period for the past year and had not even noticed the wrapper type, this would not have been so strange. When I told my husband where I had found it and why I was almost sure it wasn't mine, he seemed not to know what it was, let alone why I was holding it. He shrugged and said most likely Fiona, his coworker, owned it. My husband often commutes to lunch with his colleagues, and as we live somewhat close to Fiona and her husband, I assumed it was quite likely the tampon had dropped out of her bag either any time he had driven with her or given her a ride. Not particularly significant. I dismissed it until a few weeks later, When we had supper with Fiona and her husband. I had so wanted to believe my husband. Yet I couldn't get over the way it had been buried in the seat and how my husband had seemed to have no concern for it whatsoever. Perhaps he was acting stupidly. It's unknown. I did something that, looking back, I find really insane. While we were out together, I staged an emergency and asked Fiona whether she carried any tampons. I sighed with relief when she handed me one nearly exactly like the tampon I had discovered in our back seat. Thus, the tampon there was most likely the same one used here, and most likely, there was an innocent explanation for why it had been placed in the back seat in the first place. Until I discovered another tampon this morning, this time in my sock drawer, I assumed I would have seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene goods. The idea of my husband having an affair makes me physically sick. Even more nauseated the idea that the lady might have left these tampons out for me to find. Should it be my husband's coworker, why would she offer me one the other night and give herself away? Under any other circumstance, I would want to discuss this with my husband. But I feel too ill and ashamed to approach him with what I discovered. What action ought I to take? Comments. I never put a tampon in a sock drawer. I had a period 30 years ago. Trust your gut, then get cameras. Neither does I. I have thought up so many reasons for the tampons that would not point to my spouse, but none of them actually make sense. If it means verifying what I currently suspect, I'm afraid to set up a camera. Has Fiona dropped by your house and had time to plant the tampon? She visited our house numerous times, and vice versa. She wasn't over any time in the past week, hence if she planted that second tampon, she had to have found a window of time when I wasn't home. Every time she and her husband visit, we all stay downstairs. You would have to go rather far to get to our bedroom. That is, past the other bedrooms, around our dogs, over the safety gate. Not saying it's impossible, but on a brief toilet stop it's really difficult. I would guess. Your children's ages are, could they have located a tampon and randomly placed it? 2 and nearly 4. Both have a mischievous streak, hence I didn't want to rule out the chance of one of them shifting stuff around, but I can't see how they could get their hands on one, maybe 2 odd tampons that I never bought. Update 1. My own hell for the past few weeks has been thinking about every conceivable source of 2 tampons. Nonetheless, I wanted to provide an update. Not long after uploading on here, I told my sister what happened. The tampon from Fiona, my husband's ignorance, the tampon in the back seat and the one in the sock drawer. All the things I suspected but didn't want to accept. The tampons, save from the one I had already thrown away, matched exactly in varying absorbencies. I hadn't left anywhere my husband or daughters would have found them and relocated them. Regarding what they were or where they had come from, my daughters were clueless. With my spouse or without, my sister was sure it was Fiona. She advised asking Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue since direct confrontation of either party still sounded like a horrible idea. Sadly, they already had preparations in mind. Our house for any misplaced or foreign items, there were none. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game from there, watching my husband for any changed behavior, there was none, and even the girls for any new friends they could have met. The final aspect was especially important to my sister's husband, and it helped to explain his inclination to think the tampons were safe. Given my husband was the one driving the children to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. If anything had been happening in or around our house, he said it would be almost impossible to keep from me and the girls. That helped me somewhat to feel better. I felt differently only till my younger kid, 2 years old, dropped something down last week. My husband demanded that I continue at work while he stayed home with her, even though I wanted to be the one looking after her. I had no problem with that. At that point, we were all already starting to move past the tampon crisis since my sister and her husband considered it as a positive indication that he would take the time off at short notice. By the 3rd or 4th day, I was merely glad to see a nearly healthy child and a spouse supporting her through it. But towards the conclusion of that week, I returned to find something unusual. Now clad in a onesie I had never seen before, the child I had left that morning in an old PJ set had a small clip in her hair. Though I have a very decent idea of what my children wear on a daily basis, especially in terms of attire, I cannot say I have the best recollection. Before we would have our second, I had vowed off full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before. Long snaps are simply a pain in the ass and a no-go for effective diaper changes. Just not something I would dress her in. My hubby knows as much. He definitely doesn't accessorize the girls' clothes and neither does he plan for or buy them. The idea of someone being around our ill child without our awareness confused and rather stunned me. I went straight to inquire whether anyone had been over to visit my spouse or the girls. I didn't second think. Like before, he seemed perplexed and asked me why I would believe that. All day it had been him and the children. Once more, I asked him whether someone had stopped over to say hello. He denied it. I should cool off, he advised. Our oldest daughter was in the room and realized something was wrong, so even if I might have screamed out and came forward with the charges right then and there. My husband swore that the girls had not been with anyone but him. I asked him a third time in a subdued manner if anyone had been near our children. He also denied styling anyone's hair or shopping for new clothing. I chose to leave since our daughter was in the room and my feelings were all over the range. Then I couldn't make sense of it. It hardly looks clearer now after I drove myself mad with illogical arguments. Comments. My 2-year-old can only string a few words at a time to respond to a few inquiries. She responds depending on the cues I provide when I question her about her time with daddy or her wardrobe. I might inquire, "Who gave you that pretty bow?" And she might answer pretty bow back to me, or mama, or daddy over and over. Almost 4, my older daughter was in daycare that morning. She cannot remember anything different from that day. Her memory of the PJ change or the hair clip is lacking, hence my estimate is she was changed during that morning, but I'm not sure exactly. My 45-minute trip to work makes stopping for lunch very impractical. My sister has not observed anything unusual. She has been gracious enough to leave work and drive past several times here and there. At the front door is a Ring camera. I have the app on my phone with alerts enabled. Not yet, nothing exists. I'm merely the least tech-savvy person, hence I would be open to suggestions for more covert surveillance, worried another camera will be easy to find. Edit. We indeed routinely test our carbon monoxide detectors. One of the hair clips might have originated from a daycare. Although I could see the hair clip as a possibility, less plausible with the onesie. If either of my younger daughters had returned with something like that before, I would have noticed, especially since it was the kind of onesie I detest with a passion, LOL. She hadn't been to daycare in days. People say they are eager to know how this story ends. The Hollywood horror ending is my financial one. Hopefully, I dreamed about the dogs too so I could at last quit gathering their imagined shits and things. Update 2. I knew I was nowhere with the accusations and half-baked guesses after almost losing my head over a hair clip and a onesie. I wasn't sleeping, eating or taking care of myself the way I should have been since I was so consumed in the paranoia and suffering of my circumstances and I wasn't getting any answers. I thus decided to activate the hidden cameras and have them sent to my sister's house. My brother-in-law agreed to assist with the install/setup at my place. Still, I got my much-needed validation before the cameras were ever delivered. Last week, while I was at work, a Ring alert let me know the motion at the front door. Half expecting to see a delivery person, pet or lawn care salesman for the 15th time, you may picture my astonishment when I watched a footage of a young woman leading my daughter into the house hand in hand with my husband and our other daughter close by. My spouse was at work. The girls were meant to be in childcare. From what I knew, the wife was residing 2 states away under court order keeping her there. I asked my husband straight away what this woman was doing in our house. He ignored me, so I texted him. Knowing I had received the Ring alert, he most likely understood he had messed up by entering the front door and sought to postpone the unavoidable. He was foolish too. But after the 5th or 6th call he at last answered. As I would subsequently learn, the woman on the camera was my husband's sister. She most certainly supplied the bow, the onesie, and the tampons. She is also a recovered addict who spent the better part of her childhood and young adulthood pressuring the silence of another one of my husband's family members following her molestation. She is also a registered sex offender. Years had passed without seeing or hearing from her, and from the way my husband spoke about her, I never expected I would. But here she was, in our house surrounded by our kids. Let me say, I was enraged. Though it was hardly an affair at all, knowing who it was and why all of this had been happening made it much more repulsive. My husband was particularly high on the list since my sister-in-law, fresh out of another stay in recovery, had wanted to rebuild relationships with those she had harmed. My husband had been meeting in secret, usually at our house while I was at work, not wanting me to know, or worse, keep her away from our family and children. They would come in via the garage in my husband's car so the Ring camera at the front entrance wouldn't alert me. She had even stayed in our bed overnight on a weekend when I had gone on a business trip. On a night my husband told me he dropped off our daughters, she watched over them. She bought the girls' clothes and dressed my youngest in the onesie and bow, the identical ones my husband had promised in his life that I had dressed her in myself. My spouse insisted this was all in my head, the tampons, the one piece, the bow, everything else. Shrugging aside each increasingly disturbing revelation like it was news to him and telling me I was being unreasonable, he was quite happy to see me suffer for weeks over a lady he maintained did not exist. 2 years after I had given birth to a child, 4 years after I had told him one of my main worries about parenthood was PPD like my mother had experienced with me. I worried about not being totally present for our children and about having shame and remorse all around as they got older. He advised me to get back off and reassess my mental health. I missed the girls too much and wasn't sleeping enough. Since he was my spouse and since no other way of events made sense, I gave him the benefit of the doubts. After a month of this mental game, I have nothing to show for my trust except this miserable state and a great deal of resentment. Call the cops and a lawyer, comments 1. Reaction. Already on it. We are, believe me, walking burnt ground with this. Am I the asshole for criticizing the name my cousin picked out for her baby and ruining her excitement? My cousin Stephanie and I are really more friends than relatives. An important note is that she's not really online much, so can be out of the loop on certain memes and jokes in internet culture, and TBH, doesn't really understand the concept of viral internet references or how they work. Stephanie is pregnant and just found out it's going to be a girl. About a week ago she told a gathering of her best girlfriends that she's going to name her daughter Karen. The room instantly went cold, but after an awkward silence, everyone else politely said it was lovely. I couldn't bring myself to respond at all. Later in the evening, when Stephanie was out of the room, everyone was immediately like, OMG, that poor kid, and why would she pick Karen of all names? I was uncomfortable with this conversation, given that everyone had been so positive about the name to her face. I thought more about it over the next couple of days, and just felt really weird about the whole thing. The name is really loaded, to the point it could be detrimental to the baby, and Stephanie had no idea of the connotations to make an informed decision. So a couple of days later, I tentatively brought it up. I told her I was so excited for the baby, and just wanted her to have all available information when picking a name. I then started to explain that Karen has some negative connotations and has become sort of an internet joke to describe a specific kind of entitled middle-aged woman. Stephanie instantly was furious and started talking over me, saying, "Why are you saying this? This is so mean." I was really surprised by her reaction. It felt very, very out of character, so I immediately stopped and said, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, I just wanted to tell you something I thought you might not know." She replied, "That's the name I picked for my daughter. And you think I picked it as some kind of joke? I don't understand why you'd say something so hurtful." When she said that, I felt like it signaled that she didn't really understand what I was trying to tell her, so after agonizing for a second about whether to press the issue even though she was so angry, I felt like in for a penny. In for a pound. And since she was already mad, I wanted her to at least understand what I was trying to explain to her. I googled Karen Know Your Meme on my phone and tried to show her the screen of results while saying, "Look, I'm just saying that there's more meaning to the name than you may realize." She stood up, pushed my phone away and shouted, "Wow!" She then stormed out of my home and drove away. My aunt and mom have been berating me all week, because Stephanie told them that I made fun of her baby name. Stephanie has not spoken to me or responded to my text since. I can take a hint and I'm not going to broach a topic again that caused so much distress, but I keep going back and forth on whether I was TA here by bringing it up in the first place. Note, in the original post, OOP was overwhelmingly given a YTA judgment in response to this post. Edit. Thanks everyone. I have been properly schooled, and I accept my judgment that I was TA here. Stephanie and I have a history of being extremely open and honest with each other. I was the maid of honor in her wedding, which we planned on being the case from a young age, and we always joked as teenagers that part of my duties would include talking her out of the marriage if the groom she picked sucked. And so maybe I was too flippant with approaching this topic due to our history, and was unempathetic in underestimating how much she was already invested in the name she chose for her future daughter. I admit I'm a bit frustrated that Stephanie still doesn't understand what I was trying to tell her. She still thinks I was making some kind of weird, cruel joke accusing her of picking the name as a joke. But I have messaged her a sincere apology that she accepted, and I will never speak of this again, to Stephanie or baby Karen. I'll also stand up for Stephanie if her other friends shit talk the name around me again. If they're not willing to voice their thoughts to Stephanie directly, they need to not say the kinds of things they were saying behind her back. Edit 2. One more thing. I definitely was not trying to tell Stephanie to not name her daughter Karen. I just wanted her to make the decision either way knowing the connotations, since I'd want someone to do the same for me if I picked a baby name with cultural baggage I wasn't aware of. I realize now I handled it poorly and was hurtful to Stephanie in the process, but I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't actively trying to talk her out of the name. I just didn't want her to be blindsided if it came up later. Additional context from OP's comments. Stephanie and her husband have a deal on baby names where she picks girl baby names, he picks boy baby names, and they each have unlimited veto power for the other person's choices. He's on board with Karen Fek. We're all the same age, late 20s, but neither of them spends time online or is even particularly tech-savvy. Update 1. My post last summer wasn't the most exciting or dramatic on AITA, but I wanted to provide an update if anyone is interested. Baby Karen was born healthy and happy back in October. She's an absolute sweetheart of a baby, and I'm totally in love with her. Between March and May I didn't get to see her at all in person, but I was doing regular FaceTime, house party calls with Stephanie and Karen, and over the last few weeks, I've been going over to Stephanie's house to sit in her backyard and chat with Stephanie at Karen from a lengthy distance. I have 2 reasons for updating. First, I've realized since Karen's birth that her name has taken on new meaning to me. When I'm with her, Karen just means her, and I don't think about the other connotations. In other words, you guys were right. That said though, my second reason for updating is that Stephanie got back into her years unused Facebook at the beginning of the pandemic to keep in touch with people. She's been on it pretty regularly lately for the first time in years. Historically, she's not really been into social media. Most people in our area, social circle have been posting really heavily about BLM and the protests happening right now, as well as racial justice issues more generally. As a result, Stephanie has now come into contact with a deluge of Karen memes for the first time, and found them confusing and horrifying, especially the use of Karen as shorthand for a racist. I've basically just declined to talk about it with Stephanie, because it went so poorly last time, but both my mother and her mother have hounded me about it because it's upsetting to Stephanie, and said things like, "Is this what you were talking about before? Why didn't you say so? Why didn't you explain it better? You should have told Stephanie." And Jesus wept. You really can't win. Thanks again for all your feedback on my last post. It was very helpful in giving me some zen about the situation. Edit. Wow, I've been super overwhelmed by the flood of very kind, heartfelt PMs, and just 1 or 2 not so kind ones, as well as the comments on my other post. Thank you everyone. It continually amazes me how many nice and empathetic people frequent a sub devoted to assholes. Additional comments from OP for context. In response to someone criticizing Stephanie, to be fair, Stephanie has been cool about it. First, she saw a bunch of posts about the Central Park Karen, when that white lady was harassing the black birdwatcher in the park, and came to me asking me to explain why everyone was calling the woman Karen when her name was Amy. Since she's gotten back on Facebook, she often asks me to be like her internet culture interpreter. I immediately told her, sorry, I'm not having a conversation with you about this, because we had a major conflict over it last year, and I'm not getting into it with you. I think that was the first time she started to understand what I'd been telling her last year. And in fairness to her, she didn't bring it up with me again after that. As for my mom and aunt, they're kind of generally ridiculous. They tend to be extremely reactive to whatever is going on precisely at the moment, and if someone in the family is upset, they get over-involved trying to fix it. Stephanie has been venting to her mom about this, not about me, just how upsetting the memes are. And she and my mom have just been doing their normal thing of blowing it out of proportion, and now making it my fault somehow. I love my mom and aunt dearly, but they're not to be reasoned with. In response to another criticism of Stephanie, honestly, with my mom and aunt, it's easier to just wait for them to move on to the next shiny thing. I don't blame Stephanie at all. She's just upset and confused, but hasn't made it my problem at all. My aunt and mom just have a flair for the dramatic. In response to someone saying they still thought OP was TA because they only brought up concerns with the name for selfish reasons. I probably wasn't clear about this in my original post, and I think it's probably because that's the part I cut down when I went way over the word limit on that first post, but when I described feeling weird and uncomfortable over the couple of days I took to ruminate after Stephanie's announcement, the weirdness and discomfort was mostly a response to what happened with our friend group rather than just my own feelings about the name. I felt super uncomfortable being in the room while our friends shit-talked Stephanie's name choice after praising it to her face. I didn't have the presence of mind to call them out before the moment passed, and I sat with that guilt for a couple of days. I didn't want to tell Stephanie what they said, because it would be tattly of me, and I also didn't want to cause conflict within the friend group or upset Stephanie. So raising the topic on my own seemed like a good compromise at the time. I did wrestle internally with how to handle it, and clearly I missed the mark. In response to the comment, do you understand that there is a massive difference in being upset with your friends for their response, and approaching Stephanie because you say you want her to be fully informed of her name choice? These are 2 different things that you're conflating. No, to be clear, I didn't raise the conversation with Stephanie in lieu of scolding our friends. I brought it up because I thought they owed it to her to raise those points to her face if they were going to say them at all. Ultimately, I thought Stephanie was owed the knowledge of those connotations, whatever she chose to do with that knowledge. Also, I don't know how to explain the context of our relationship, but Stephanie and I have a lifetime of shared radical honesty with one another, from the inconsequential, telling each other when outfits are unflattering, to the difficult, when she gave me a come to Jesus talk years ago about how someone I considered a close friend was super shitty to me and that I should end the friendship. Based on our extreme closeness and shared history, this conversation felt like the right move at the time, even though it ultimately backfired. Update 2. Hi all, I've gotten a few PMs over the last couple years asking for updates, and since we just celebrated Karen's 3rd birthday, I wanted to circle back to anyone following this story. First of all, baby Karen, not so much a baby anymore, is doing amazingly on her developmental milestones. She's a very bright child, sharp as the sharpest tack, and extremely tuned into her environment. Some of what she says is already fully in complete sentences, which just makes me want to cry when I hear it, because it seems like Stephanie was giving birth just yesterday. Karen loves books already, and will intently study the pictures in them for huge stretches of time and claim to be reading. And you would not believe the uncomfortably incisive questions she's already asking. I am fully convinced this child is going to grow up to be an actual genius. Regarding the name, unfortunately, when Karen started daycare earlier this year, she started getting grief for her name pretty quickly from the older kids. The daycare she attends mixes the ages together at a couple of different points throughout the day, and while there fortunately wasn't much direct bullying, 2 of the age 5s must have heard and internalized the derogatory connotations of the name Karen at home. As a result, they found her name absolutely hysterical, and they kind of spread the idea to the other kids that there was something funny wrong about her name. Karen was too little to understand what was happening, but found the other kids' behavior toward her generally upsetting. The daycare staff made every effort to shut it down, and let Stephanie and her husband know right away. After about a month of this, where the daycare wasn't having much success putting the kibosh on this behavior, and the kids weren't dropping it, Stephanie and her husband made the decision that Karen would be going by Carrie from now on, which was already an established nickname that a lot of family and friends were already using, and that Karen already recognized as referring to herself. Stephanie and I never really fully revisited what happened during her pregnancy, but when she was telling me about what was happening in daycare, she apologized to me. I immediately felt terrible and reassured her there was no reason to apologize. Emotions are complicated when you're pregnant, and that I thought having Karen go by Carrie was a great solution. Though changing what you're used to calling someone is fucking hard, I've found. And I'm still directly addressing her on manual mode, every single time. A lot of the responses I got to my last post were gleeful and leaned into the schadenfreude of the situation. And I have to say those responses really bummed me out. I would much rather live in a world where I was wrong about the impact Karen's name would have on her. I cannot emphasize enough what a sweet-dispositioned, smart, curious, loving little girl Carrie is, and how much she deserves every good thing in life. Also, a lot of people didn't like Stephanie in my last post, but I need you to understand that this is a tiny snapshot of a very emotionally high-strung time in her life, and overall, Stephanie is a wonderful lifelong friend. She has gotten me through so many personal crises over the years, and she will never fail to show up for the people she cares about. Being pregnant and having a strong emotional attachment to the name you've picked out for your daughter is completely understandable, and her pregnancy was pretty rough on her moods. She once wept uncontrollably at a cat food commercial when she was about 7 months pregnant. I also think my approach for trying to explain the name issue those years ago was very clumsy, and I could have done a better job of bringing it up. That said, with the distance of time, I am really glad I broached the topic. I feel like I owed Stephanie that information, and I can feel good about giving it to her. If I'd chosen not to bring it up at the time, I think I'd have a lot of regrets now. The only thing I'd change now, looking back, is that I would try to bring it up more gently somehow with Stephanie so I could have had the chance to explain. In summary, all is well. We've run into a little bump in the road with other kids' reactions to Carrie's name, but in some ways, it's better to get this out of the way now, when Carrie doesn't really understand what's happening, than have this happen in kindergarten or elementary school down the road, when full-on bullying could be a risk. She's adjusting really well to going by her nickname full-time, and Stephanie and her husband are planning on enrolling her with Carrie as her preferred name in all future schooling. And since schools around here go by preferred name rather than legal name in things like classroom roll calls, it's possible she can get through K-12 without it ever really being widely known among her peers that her legal name is Karen. And I really hope this common usage of the name Karen dies down in the next few years. Edit. Really disappointed to be getting hate messages directed at Carrie, wishing that terrible things befall her and calling her the C word. Please remember she's an innocent child. Edit 2. Point of clarification. The boys at daycare apparently didn't know that Karen was a name. The way they'd heard it used at home made them think it was just a term used to insult people, and that it might be a bad word. That's why they found it so funny, because in their worldview, it was like meeting someone named Fartface, or Asshole. The daycare staff explained to them that Karen is a real name, and that lots of people are named Karen, and of course they tried their best to curtail the mockery, but nothing really helped until the name change and a little bit of time had passed. Things at the daycare are now back to normal, the other kids are calling her Carrie, and everyone has, fortunately, moved on. Edit 3. Please don't harass Redditors who gave a YTA judgment on my first post. They gave their honest judgment at the time in an online space specifically set up for the purpose. I didn't post on an advice sub, I posted on a judgment sub. And there's no reason to call people to the mat for judgments I asked for, made in good faith, from 3 years ago. A comment defending Stephanie in response to someone commenting that she's a bad friend to OP. Stephanie is genuinely a great friend and a good person. She once dropped everything and drove 300 miles because I had just been in a, relatively minor, car accident in a city I lived all alone in as a young adult. She once gifted me $1,500, no questions asked, and insisted I never even think about paying it back, when I needed to get out of a really bad cohabiting situation while broke. When we were teenagers and the cool boy she had a massive crush on made fun of me for something I was extremely sensitive about. Instead of keeping quiet, she blew her top, stuck up for me and told him off, then led me away to comfort me away from him. She is loyal and kind and has incredible character. This post is such a tiny snapshot of who she is as a person. When I raised my concerns, Stephanie was emotional, very pregnant and somewhat sleep deprived. Her pregnancy was rough on her body, and on top of hormones, I think she was just genuinely confused by what I was trying to tell her. Final update. For those of you who have contacted me asking for an update, I wanted to circle back and close the book on the baby Carrie chapter. As of last month, Carrie is now legally Caroline, last name, and she has even been issued a new birth certificate with her new legal name. The daycare bullying issues had already died down since Stephanie and her husband switched to calling her Carrie, but this legal name change now means that the Karen issue won't crop up again when she starts school. There were also some other minor incidents that pushed Stephanie and her husband to make that decision around a legal name change. They were getting to the point where, almost any time they were having to provide Karen's legal name to get a service, they were getting an immediate reaction, even from adults. It was usually just a meaningful look, but barbed comments were not unusual. The final straw was when they were at the airport getting ready to fly to visit Stephanie's in-laws with Carrie. The TSA agent at security made a snarky comment, and then later when they needed to ask the gate agent about their seats, the gate agent rudely laughed at seeing Carrie's ticket, then showed the gate agent standing next to her, who just shook her head and said, "Poor kid," to her co-worker while fully ignoring Stephanie and her husband. And they had this interaction in front of Carrie. Something about that day in the airport was a turning point for Stephanie and her husband, and they started the name change process as soon as they got home. It was much easier than they were expecting, and cost a grand total of $30. Carrie is a joyful, sociable little girl, and while it's impossible to know right now if these negative experiences caused any lasting damage, and I sincerely hope they did not, I'm happy to see that she continues to be a very outgoing, confident child. The conversation with Stephanie I mentioned in my October update was awkward and brief, but we've actually gotten back into it a few times since. Stephanie has apologized profusely for her initial reaction when we first talked. I've apologized for approaching things so poorly, and not telling her right away about what our friends were saying behind her back, and in those conversations, we mainly ended up focusing on the resulting spiraling of my mom and aunt and what a mess that turned into. Together we've started to unpack some of the intergenerational shit around our family issues. To provide some of that context, our maternal grandparents were a nightmare. Our grandfather was an authoritarian revivalist preacher who was physically abusive and referred to himself as the spiritual leader and ultimate authority of the family. Our grandmother was a manipulative narcissist, who psychologically tormented my mom and aunt for their entire childhoods. As a result, my mom and aunt's trauma bonded considerably during their childhood and grew into extremely anxious and reactive adults. Any whiff of conflict sends them into panic mode, and in our family, we have these well-worn grooves of behavioral habits with my mom and aunt overreacting to anything that feels like discord, and scrambling to clumsily smooth things over. As a result, Stephanie and I have both been working hard to build better boundaries with our mom's generation, and have agreed to be really cautious about what information we give them, especially anything that is highly emotional. I've been in therapy for a couple of years now, and Stephanie also started therapy late last year. We've been talking about the ways that my grandparents traumatizing our moms caused intergenerational issues that impacted us, and Stephanie is determined that the cycle ends with her, and that these issues will not go on to touch Carrie. Thank you everyone for your kind words, both here on my profile posts and on the best of updates reposts, which I've also been reading. I've gotten some incredibly thoughtful and kind messages, which have meant a lot to me, even if I haven't had the chance to respond to all of them. For those who may still want to be critical of Stephanie, I again want to emphasize how out of character her initial reaction was, and how much physical, hormonal, and emotional upheaval she was in at the time. These posts are a teeny tiny window into just one aspect of the dynamic, funny, kind, caring full human being that is my cousin and best friend. Stephanie has been my most loyal and trusted friend for pretty much my entire life, and she has fully earned some grace for reacting less than perfectly to my extremely clumsy approach when she was sleep deprived, hormonally wrecked and brain fogged. Stephanie has read these posts now as well, along with most of your comments, and, after I explained to her what Reddit is, they were helpful to both of us in our talks about our weird family dynamic. I can't imagine I'll have any more updates down the line, but thanks for following along the last few years. I discovered my so of 3 years was texting back and forth with another person every day and was sending nude photos to each other. A little bit of backstory. SO and I have been together for 4 years, and about 2 years ago when the Rona hit, I moved in with him as we both lost our respective jobs and needed to save a bit from gas and utilities. Since then I have found a new office job and so takes some odd jobs online, but he basically stays at home most of the time. So has always been on the controlling side. He wanted me to cut all my male friends from my life. Hindsight is 20/20, I know, but in his defense, he also cut all contacts with women, or at least to my knowledge. So has always been very adamant that he doesn't condone cheating, and even if someone else in his life was a cheater, he would cut them out of his life. The relationship has had its ups and downs. We have had a fair share of arguments, and a few months ago we hit a rough patch, but recently things were looking okay for a while. Or so I thought. So has become quite guarded with his phone lately, including hiding it if I look over his shoulder. He has never done this before, and it's very not like him. I am very open with my personal tech items. He's always welcome to look through my phone and laptop because I have nothing to hide. We even know each other's phone passwords. My gut feeling kept telling me that something was wrong, so when I got up for work this morning while he was still sleeping, I admit, I shouldn't have done what I did. I took his phone from the nightstand and checked out his conversations. So has been chatting with a girl he met online, 25. I only skimmed through the last few messages as I didn't want him to wake up and catch me snooping, but they have been texting back and forth every day while I was at work and sending each other nudes. I was so shaken and disgusted. I don't know when it all started, but I assume it's been at least a month because that's when I first noticed the suspicious phone guarding behavior. Honestly, no matter how much I look for a solution, there's no coming back from this. I know I have to leave. I haven't confronted him yet because I don't want him to try and persuade me to stay or spin it that it's my fault. I also don't believe in closure, so there's really no use in telling him that I know. Here's where I need advice. I have a place to move to and I have to move all my stuff. I don't want to have him damage my stuff to spite me or something. He has a history of throwing my possessions when angry, so I'll have people come help me move when he's not in the house. We have separate finances, so that's not an issue. The problem is, we have a dog. I adopted him with his approval when I moved in with him. I'm saying it's technically my dog since I do 90% of the dog activities. He rarely takes him out and I buy all the dog toys and dog food. Basically, he's the fun parent that gets only the pets and hugs. I know he loves the dog and the dog loves him, but I don't think he'd be able to take care of him and get up at 6 a.m. to walk him. My baby is also too used to the house and us, and he'll probably be stressed out if I move him. Should I take the dog with me without telling my soon-to-be ex, or should I leave the dog with him? Another thing I need advice for is, should I leave him a note or a message with any explanation? Update 1. First, I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my previous post. It really helped put things in perspective for me. A few people asked for an update. It will be a lengthy one, so brace yourselves. One particular comment stuck out to me, that my pet doesn't know what's best for them and they could roll in literal shit and be happy, which really solidified my decision. As a preface, I'd like to apologize. I was paranoid that I could be found out, so I altered a couple of details in the original, one of which was that we owned a cat, not a dog. However, I was still doing 90% of the caring for the cat. On to the update. After reading all the comments and making the decision to take the cat, I called my best friend, her boyfriend and my parents to tell them I'm breaking up and discuss logistics. I also told them to not mention anything in writing on the off chances that SO sees the messages. It took me quite some time to put everything in motion, 3 weeks to be precise, in which time I was doing my best to act like everything was okay while secretly moving some of my stuff to my parents' place to ease the final load. Finally, last Friday morning, my best friend, her boyfriend and my dad came. We loaded up everything on my father's truck and left. The whole ordeal took 1.5 HRS. I was honestly amazed how much stuff I managed to accumulate for just 2 years. I took everything that I paid for out of my pocket, including a monitor and a headset that I lent him due to his equipment breaking, and he never bought new ones. The only thing I left was a queen-size bed I bought shortly after moving in. I also made sure to log into X's World of Warcraft account to cancel his subscription, which was paid from my bank account. I left a note on his desk that basically said, "Do not panic, you have not been robbed." I just took all my stuff and left. I'm taking the cat with me because I don't trust you to take care of her properly. Do not call me, my friends or my family. We have already had the talk, so there's nothing else to say. Have a nice life, your ex. I didn't tell him I knew about the cheating because at this point it was irrelevant. In retrospect, it was just the last straw on top of many other problems. But hindsight is always 20/20ths. I blocked his number and never looked back. Sure enough, he messaged me on WhatsApp as soon as he came back to the empty flat. The gist of the messages was that we could have done it the Civil War, LMAO, and why did I take the cat this way, we raised her together and he loved her. He also tried to call 3 times but gave up soon after. I then blocked him on WhatsApp as well. The next few days were pretty uneventful. Yesterday, he showed up at my workplace unannounced. I was pretty annoyed but didn't want to make a scene in front of the colleges, so I took a break and went out with him to the park across the street. Knowing him, he wouldn't just fuck off and leave me alone. He said he wanted closure and that I owed it to him after all these years. The conversation was mostly boring, so I'll highlight the important details. He said he wanted his monitor back and that he's willing to pay for it or trade me his new one, which is better, but wasn't with the same curve that he was used to. I told him that I like my monitor and tough luck. The best part is he went out, bought a new monitor, set it up to play WoW, but realized that I also took the headset. He then asked his mother to buy him one and she bought headphones without a mic. Pity. He asked to have the cat back. He offered me money, offered me all his crypto savings, and even offered me 60k gold in WoW LMAO. I told him some things can't be bought with money. He then asked to co-parent, and when I said no to that too, he asked to at least say goodbye to her in person, also denied. I brought up that I'm the cat's primary caregiver and he can't even clean her shit. He replied he could, when push comes to shove, but didn't since I was doing those things anyway, despite him being in the flat almost 24/7. I also pointed out that if he really loved the cat that much, he'd want the best for her and to be with the one who takes care of her, instead of wanting to keep her for selfish reasons. He kind of agreed on that. The most baffling part, he offered to pay me to go grocery shopping together. We used to do that all the time when we were together. I pointed him to a couple of sites where he can buy groceries and have them delivered. He said it was too much work. I told him to adjust and evolve. He also apologized one too many times for hurting me, to which I replied every time I wasn't hurt, I was just disgusted and cringed at the conversations I read, to which he got offended and mumbled that it was private, you know. Not once did he mention the side chick, even then he didn't have the balls to admit to the affair. In their messages there was a recurring joke that if he comes to the hotel where she works, they'd have to fuck in the janitor's room. I brought her up a couple of times, told him I wish them both the very best, and since I left him the bed, he doesn't have to worry about fucking in the janitor's room anymore. He asked to be friends multiple times. I told him, also multiple times, he betrayed me and he's a pathological liar and I don't want to be friends with a dishonest person. He legit couldn't comprehend how his dishonesty impacts a potential friendship. He said he wanted to tell me he wasn't committed to me anymore but couldn't bring himself to do that. I pointed out the hypocrisy of him blowing up at me for platonically talking to male friends online, but he cheats the moment a semi-attractive woman comes his way. He said that a woman cheating on a man is the greatest sin but a man cheating on a woman is not so severe. What the actual fuck? The rest of the conversation was him trying to play buddy-buddy and talk to me about his life and me reminding him that I'm not interested in his life and that he's a closed chapter to me. After what seemed to be eternity, we said our, hopefully, final goodbyes and I went back to work. In conclusion, for the past week since I left, I've felt like a huge load have dropped off my shoulders. I have all the time in the world, I'm working on myself, I'm reconnecting with people I haven't talked to in years. I'm trying to live my best life and I don't regret anything. There were good times, there were bad times. It was a valuable experience and a lesson learned what to look for in a partner and, more importantly, what not to overlook. Huge thanks to everyone that commented on my post. You really gave me the push I needed to make what I hope is the right decision. Update 2. I was contemplating whether to write this last update or not. A bunch of things have happened since I last posted and eventually, I figured we are all more or less people who laugh at their own farts and enjoy the occasional justice boner, so I decided y'all might appreciate how karma has caught up with X. Disclaimer and some background. I left out a lot of information in the original post and altered a lot of details to make sure X does not find the post and connect the dots. Our real ages are 28, him, 33, me, and 34, side chick. X and I were together for almost 7 years. Note 4. X had a chronic disease, nothing fatal if treated, very manageable, and a lot of people with the condition can work. He was of course using it as an excuse not to work, even online work, and mooch off me. We lived with his mother, who was supporting his narrative that he is too sick to work. X was abusive, first only verbally, but it progressed to physical abuse. I omitted most of this information in the first post because I wanted an unbiased opinion whether to take the cat or not. Even though the cheating was the last nail in the coffin of our relationship, I was actually contemplating leaving him for almost a year before the actual fact, and on occasions where he ramped up the abuse. I will withhold giving examples for the time being because the topic might be traumatic for some readers. My last update ended with my ex coming to work to offer me pixel money for my cat. This was in August 2022. I vacated his flat at the end of July. I thought everything was said and done and I would not hear from him again. Spoiler, I was wrong. Since the breakup, he has messaged me about every 3 months on Discord for various bullshit, like how he lost his best friend or asking for photos of the cat. I didn't block him there in case either of us needed to exchange items we forgot at our respective places. Sometime in March I found out by chance that he's still using my old League account. He has been banned on 3 different accounts for toxicity. I gave him the password while we were dating, but I did not think he would have the audacity to continue using it after we broke up. The kicker is, all it would take would be to ask me to use it and I would have no problems with it. It really rubbed me the wrong way that he could message me with his woe is me crap on 4 different occasions but conveniently forgot to mention that he is still playing on my account. I wondered for about a week whether to let it slide or to just change the password. Then he contacted me again about wanting to ask me something. I shot this down and reminded him that I explicitly told him not to contact me. He said okay. This lasted for a fortnight until he messaged me again, saying that he will ask his question regardless. I pointed out how I told him not to contact me and he could not respect even that. So he has learned nothing, as he still does not give a fuck about other people's boundaries. The question was, what did it feel like to be with a complete monster for 7 years? Why did you stay for so long? Apparently the lad was going through some kind of epiphany phase. There were a lot of crocodile tear-laced explanations that followed. The gist of it was that he was doing some reflections. He realized he is a complete lunatic and needs help and apologized for how he behaved. I also found out that he spent all his savings and disability money, including the crypto he offered me for the cat. So he could not take me up on the offer to buy my LOL account. Sag. Also, to nobody's surprise, his little affair did not work out. I did not ask for details, but what he said was, I think I finally met a person who is more sick and broken inside than me, which is quite an achievement. Few months prior to this revelation, a WoW friend from the side chick's country messaged me. For context, we are all Europeans and play on the same servers. Friend knew my side of the story, and when he found out that side chick is flying to my and ex's country, he put 2 and 2 together. He told me he does not expect much from their relationship since a year ago the chick was dating a mate of his, broke his heart and flew somewhere else for the next WoW guy that gave her attention. Knowing these facts, and after what my ex said, I mentioned to him how it was ironic that he cried cheating if I was 5 minutes late after work, but decided to involve himself with a woman who was practicing cheating as a sport. He agreed that it was quite ironic indeed and that he had to lay in the bed that he made, which was sort of mature on his part, I suppose. Also, did I mention he was too dumb to wire his own debit card to his WoW account? This is why he could not play anymore. Well, yeah, but I guess also because he lost his sugar mommy that was paying for it and failed to secure another. As for me, Kitty and I are thriving. I am active. I lost 12 kilograms since the breakup and I'm getting back in shape, even though I lost the excess weight the moment I dumped the ex. I have reconnected with most of my friends and apologized for not contacting them very much in the past 7 years and explained why. They were very understanding and things have gone very much to how they were before. I have also met the most decent, kind and compassionate man out there. So, life is looking good. Thank you for all the support, Reddit. Thank you for reading and have a great day. My husband is a doctor. Am I the asshole for wanting him to be by my side holding my hand during childbirth instead of delivering our baby? I originally posted this in Am I the Asshole, and it was removed. I can't see any of the comments now. I, 35, am 7 months pregnant. I am married to a family medicine doctor, 35, and we've been together for 10 years. This is a throwaway account on Reddit because my sister-in-law follows me on Reddit and reports everything to my husband. I'm reaching out to all of you to ask for advice on a fight my husband and I are having about our birth plan. My husband really wants to deliver the baby, which I can kind of understand. It's not uncommon for doctors to deliver their own child. There is still an obstetrician-gynecologist there, monitoring everything. And the doctor-father steps in at the last minute as the mother is crowning to just catch the baby. My husband has, I guess, always dreamed of being the one to pull the baby out, while I pictured it very differently. I thought he would be up by my head, holding my hand and helping me through it. He says he will do that, but the easiest part is the very end where I won't need him anyway. He said if I really want someone there, his mom can step in. I've been on my own since I was a kid living in my car, so I don't have anyone I'd want in there with me except him. I don't really even want his mom in there. She's great, but he's my person. I know it would be cool for him to deliver our baby, but I really feel like I need him there. I personally didn't want our doctors to know he was a doctor because as soon as any of my doctors, or even our veterinarian, finds out he's a doctor, they talk exclusively to him. I don't even want him to go to the prenatal appointments anymore because no one talks to me. They all talk to him, and I can't ask my questions to anyone but my husband at home. But he's already told everyone he'll be delivering his first baby. I guess I don't want this because I wanted him to be there as a husband and a father and not a doctor. I see him as a doctor 95% of the time, and I wanted to experience this with my husband and not my husband the doctor. I wanted him to be there for me as this is my first birth and I'm terrified. He just keeps telling me I'll be fine. He pulled in friends and family who also don't understand my point of view. They said this is his first child too and to just let him have this since I had the honor of being pregnant. I just really wanted him to hold my hand all the way through it and be able to share this experience as parents and people instead of a medical professional. I was hoping we could see the baby at the same time and just be equals in this. Am I being selfish for wanting this to be my way? Relevant comments, from all subreddits. Commenter. He pulled in friends family who also don't understand my POV. They said this is his first child too and to just let him have this since I had the honor of being pregnant. Who are these people? And why does everyone defer to your husband this way? Your request is totally reasonable and your husband's lack of understanding is pretty glaring. NTAOP, his mom, sisters, and our really close friends that I guess are technically more his friends than mine. I haven't brought it up to my friends because I'm just not comfortable having our friends weigh into our relationship the way he is. I think his mom just likes his plan because it pulls her into the room which I attempted to veto early on. I do love her so much, but I wanted this to be our experience. Commenter, downvoted, NTA. But you both have visions of how your baby will be born, so you need to talk it out. Chances are the very last part of the birth you are not going to be holding hands. He is going to be with you in the delivery room either way, but this is something the two of you need to resolve. It's not enough to say I want. Find a compromise. For example, if he holds your hand the entire time you're in labor and only steps in as doctor for a few minutes of actual birth, wouldn't you both have a win? Focus on having a healthy baby and creating a happy family instead of on scenes you've created in your imagination. And that applies to both of you. OP, I don't see that as a compromise. That's exactly what he wants to have happen. But the entire birthing process is incredibly emotional and exhausting. I don't want him to step away for those moments because they are what I picture to be the most painful and exhausting. I want him with me until the baby is out and we can hold her. I don't want to be abandoned during my birth while he and the other doctors catch the baby and begin the baby's workup. He's going to deliver the baby and hold the baby all while I won't be able to see anything because my legs will be in the air. I'll miss my husband holding and seeing my baby for the first time and I'll feel completely by myself and like I'm missing out on those crucial first moments. Maybe you're not a woman. But nothing sounds worse to me than having my legs in the stirrups, immediately post-birth with a sheet draped over my legs where I can't see my husband or baby meeting for the first time. Commenter, deleted, downvoted. I think you're overestimating what your attention span will be like in those moments. My mom let my dad catch both of their babies and she told me that when she was doing those final pushes, she didn't care where my dad was. All she wanted was to get the baby out. She also said it meant a lot to see the joy on my dad's face and having him hand her the baby instead of some random doctor or nurse made the bonding process more special. I'm not telling you this to change your mind. I'm just giving you an idea of what that moment could be like. OP, I just don't see it playing out that way. If he is there to catch the baby, he's going to want to start doing some of the exams and we're already having so much trouble getting the doctors to talk to me and keep me informed. It just feels like another link I'll lose to the situation to actually be kept up to date and prioritized in the moment. I know that sounds really silly, but I've been sitting in on my ultrasound appointments and prenatal appointments, and they are focused on the belly, but not on me. Pretty much everyone talks exclusively to my husband. It's been a huge challenge to feel like I'm a part of it and not just coincidentally caring for the baby. Commenter. Tell him that you've had to do everything by yourself your whole life already. This is not one of the things you can do by yourself and you want him there when it comes out. You just want support once from the start to finish. It's lonely always having to take yourself places, to teach yourself, entertain yourself and so on. And it's exhausting. Especially growing up like that your whole childhood, knowing people can just up and leave. Maybe tell him you're feeling so effing lonely, that you just want him to be there. If he doesn't understand, you may as well do this by yourself again. Surely the nurse can tell him to stay with you and now is not the right time, Mr. Doctor, sir. Oh, and it's out. Sorry, congratulations your parents. OP, I'm going through so many comments, but I stopped and read yours 50 times and it hit me really hard. This is it, this is why I feel the way I do. Thank you so much. Thank you. Update comment 1. Not sure the right way to update. Posting it here as well. Update. I am going to confront him tonight when he gets home. He's already going to be upset because we both have restrictions on how much time we spend on social media sites and I have significantly surpassed that today and yesterday, which he'll know as soon as he reviews the router logs. I'm hopeful I can catch him before that makes him too upset. I did reach out to some of our mutual friends just to see what he has told them for why this is so important to him, only to learn he never discussed this with them. I think he made up what he has been saying. They were really shocked to learn we've been having this disagreement and were actually quite supportive of an expectant mother controlling her birth plan. I'm quite nervous about his reaction to this as well and I'd like to get ahead of this. Wish me luck and cross your fingers for me. Update comment 2. I first want to say, thank you. Thank you every single one of you who took the time to reply, send messages, check up on me, send me messages and share your stories. I've read so much more than I'll ever be able to respond to. Thank you. Those who took the time to share resources and volunteer your own time, you're angels in the flesh. Thank you. I'm so incredibly touched by this overwhelming outpour of love and support. Also, thank you to even the people who told me I was selfish or crazy or any other derogative you chose to use. I'm not sure what helped me more, the people posing such great questions about if I felt safe, comfortable, loved, or the people telling me I was the terrible person. Something about attempting to reread my story as an outsider and seeing the comments where Redditors told me I was in fact the problem broke something in me and I finally saw through the haze. But hey, maybe try to be nicer to strangers on the internet and consider your words more carefully. We're all people trying to get through life. So many of you are kind, caring and loving individuals. Thank you for caring about some random things on the internet. I don't even have words. I can't say a whole lot about these last few days. So much has happened that I will be processing for years to come. All I can say is I am safe and I am free, read into that as you will. My next steps are leaving this chapter of my life behind. I'm moving out of this city and I'm going to try starting again somewhere new. Somewhere beautiful where every time I look outside, it's hard to believe it's real life. I've always felt drawn to the mountains with all of their beauty and might. I don't plan to ever log into this account, or even Reddit, ever again. I did the same thing at 16. And I'm hopeful these last few decades have set me up for more success than I had the first time chasing a new start. If you read my story, and you relate to it in any way, or you too feel smothered, voiceless and alone every single day locked in the house with someone who is supposed to love you, I just want you to know what I now know. That isn't normal. That isn't what life is supposed to be. There are people you can rely on and strangers can be your best friend. The cost may be steep, but the cost to stay is so much more. Farm this post for all of the comments and support available. I pass it on to you and beg you to use what resources you can find. The sheer volume of personal messages I received from people in the same boat, people sharing support, people checking in to make sure I was okay. There's such a community here and they will help you before you even realize you need it. I'm not sure what's next and that's terrifying but also refreshing. I haven't had that in so many years. My ex-husband left when I was pregnant with twins. Now, he suspects I cheated and demands a paternity test for my children. My ex-husband and I have 3 children. It was a difficult split as he left while I was pregnant with our twins and he tried to make everything as difficult as possible. He and his wife are wanting me to do a paternity test on the children as they are disputing that our youngest is his and he no longer wants to pay child support for her. Him wanting to reduce his child support has been an ongoing issue. For the last 5 years, he hasn't had a problem regarding the paternity of any of our children. He's now stating that he doesn't think that our daughter is his and that I have cheated because she doesn't look like him. She doesn't look much like me either, She's got green eyes like I do. Both of us are pale with light-colored hair and eyes. Our daughter has dark hair that is thick and curly. She looks mixed race and she's the only one who looks this way. Her twin brother looks like my ex-husband. My daughter looks like my grandmother who was mixed race and was white passing. I'll be honest that he and his wife do not get along. I mean, it is hard to get along with the woman who your husband left you for. She keeps trying to shove herself in my children's lives and acting like their mom. She keeps insisting that she's mama, and they should refer to her as that. They have refused to call her that, which always ends at my ex calling me frustrated that the children won't give her respect. She's recently been pointing out that my youngest looks darker than her siblings and has been suggesting that my youngest isn't my ex-husband's. I'm close with my former ex's brother's wife, and she told me before my ex did that he wanted a paternity test and was going to stop paying child support for her. She's also said that ex and his wife are once again having money issues. This was something I had already suspected, as he had stopped taking them on his weekends as he was having to work overtime. Before people tell me to document this, I have everything documented. I refuse to answer calls from him, which forces him to either text or email me so that I can keep conversation records, as I don't trust him. After I found out about him wanting a paternity test, I told him that I wasn't going to consent to him doing a paternity test on the children, and the only way he was getting one is if he took me to court. He told me that it was clear our daughter wasn't his and that she didn't look like her siblings. He argued that he couldn't afford court and I was holding his money hostage by forcing him to pay for a child who isn't his. He has now apparently been whining about me on Facebook about how I cheated on him and am forcing him to raise another man's child and forced him to sign the birth certificate. I didn't, he wasn't even there, but as we were still married I could put him on without him being there. I don't follow him. I had one of his friends try and confront me about it. I want my children to have a relationship with their dad and I feel like this is stopping them. Though on the other hand, I know there will be something else he, or his wife, takes issue with down the line. AITA for refusing to do a paternity test. Edit. I thought I'd put this in my post but I didn't. Really should have proofread this rather than posting in anger. My ex wants me to pay for the paternity test. He doesn't want to because of his financial situation, which is why I told him to take it to court and get a court-mandated one. I know if I was to pay for it then he would want another one because he'll think that I tampered with it as I paid for it. He did the same when I had the house valued so I could give him half. He didn't like what the first person valued it at so had to get another. I know I haven't cheated on him and she is his. I know some didn't like me referring to her as my youngest. Both her and her brother don't like being referred to as twins or as one, so I don't refer to them as such. Since they were toddlers they have been very independent from each other and want to be treated as such. She is not my only daughter, my eldest is also a girl. Update. So I did not expect so many comments on my last post. After I posted in my frustration over the paternity test situation, my ex-husband, we'll call him Jim, and his wife kept trying to get me to consent to and pay for the paternity test. I refused to pay because I know Jim, when the result isn't what he wants he will accuse me of tampering with the results. When I kept saying no, they ran to whoever would listen, complaining about me and how I was forcing them to pay for a child that wasn't Jim's. For those who may not have read my last post, the child in question is my youngest daughter and a twin. Jim does not contest that her twin brother is his. But apparently, along with being a bitch over this, I'm also a cat. News to me. Honestly, I didn't think he was that much of an idiot, but here we are. Jim kept complaining to his dad, Mick, and brother about me and how I was being financially abusive by taking money from him for a child that wasn't his and refusing to pay for the paternity test. Now Mick and I get on very well. He adores his grandchildren. They also adore him. And I have never attempted to stop them having a relationship, unlike Jim, who often attempts to weaponize the children. I get on very well with Jim's family and we are close. His brother's wife, and I are very close. She's the sister I never had, only child problems. Mick asked if he was to pay for a paternity test, if I would allow it to happen. Mick explained that he wasn't accusing me of anything, but he was fed up with seeing Jim and his wife drag me every chance they got. He understood why I was refusing and agreed with me. I agreed but stated that Jim should choose the company that the paternity test is done through, and I didn't want to know which one was chosen. That way I wasn't involved. So we had the paternity test. Mick paid for all 3 children to be tested and had them tested with the private company Jim chose and then a private company Mick's lawyer recommended. Mick explained he did this so that if Jim started arguing against the results, calling them fake, then Mick had another set to back them up. And what do you know, all 3 children are Jim's. Since we've gotten the results, Jim has tried arguing that they're wrong and that youngest definitely isn't his. He has also been taking to Facebook to complain about me and is threatening to take me to court for fraud. The man couldn't afford to pay for a paternity test. He definitely can't afford a lawyer to take me to court, but I'd like to see him try. Former SIL has been screenshotting some of his comments and sending them over to me, which we've been having a giggle over, especially since one of the things Jim has whining about is finding out I've been dating a former friend of his. I say former because he, along with some others, were cut out by Jim's wife. Jim's upset because I'm alienating him from the children by dating someone new, coming from the man who left me when I was pregnant for his now wife, who keeps trying to insist she is mama to my children. My children only met my boyfriend for the first time this weekend, after we had been dating for a year. Before people jump to Jim's defense and claim I'm alienating him, I've never stopped him seeing or communicating with the children. He's the one that decides when he's interested in being their dad. So yeah, unsurprisingly my children are Jim's. Jim's still an idiot. The children are happy as they're off to have a sleepover at their granddad's with cousins, while I get to have wine and spend the evening catching up with former SIL. Jim and his wife are still mouthing off on social media, but it's falling on deaf ears for the most part. Relevant comments. Comment 1, he left when you were pregnant with twins but doesn't believe the youngest is his. I didn't read past that because that doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't the twins then be the youngest? OP, that's correct. She is the younger of my twins. Comment 2, so he thinks only one of the twins isn't his? OP, yep, he only thinks one of the twins is his. I wish I could explain why he thinks that, but he was never the smartest. Weird guy shows up at my parents' house at 1 a.m. looking for me using details from 20 years ago. Help me figure out this mystery. Posted this on the Creepy Encounter sub and someone suggested I post here. This happened 3 nights ago and I'm going crazy trying to figure it out. I just moved into a new apartment 1 month ago and I'm still unpacking and settling in. I have been using my parents' address as my mailing address, who live a few towns over, 20 minutes away, all of my life. 3 nights ago my parents called me at 2 a.m. and freaked out and proceeded to tell me this story. Apparently at 1 a.m. someone starts banging on their front door and repeatedly ringing their doorbell. My stepdad walks downstairs and opens the door, leaving the front glass door closed and locked. There was a man standing outside, who looked to be in his 30s, with a black hoodie on with the hood pulled up around his face. He didn't have any distinguishing facial features, facial hair or tattoos. The only thing my stepdad said was that he looked to be Hispanic. Neither my stepdad or my mother, who was watching the whole thing out a window, recognized the man. The man says, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for my full name." My stepdad plays dumb and says, "Who?" The man proceeds to state my full name again and says that my boyfriend is worried because I didn't come home that night. He claims to be a friend of my boyfriend and tells my stepdad that they are both out looking for me, worried because I didn't show up at home. I don't have a boyfriend. I live by myself with my 3 dogs and haven't been in a relationship in the past 5-6 months. Here's the weird part. My stepdad asked the guy what boyfriend he was talking about and the man told him the name of the boyfriend I had when I was in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago. My boyfriend in 10th grade has a very, very unique Italian name. I've never met anyone with a full name even close to his. He says my high school boyfriend's name a few more times to ensure my stepdad heard him and repeats that they are very worried about me. Is my stepdad sure I'm not inside? At this point my stepdad is weirded out and closes and locks the door in his face. The man does not leave. He lingers in front of my parents' house for the next 10 minutes, smoking cigarettes and talking on the phone. Finally, my parents called the cops. About 5 minutes before the cops arrive, the man walks down to the dead end on their block and drives away in a silver car. Stepdad was unable to get the license plate. My parents file a police report and nothing else happens. After I hear this story I am going nuts over the weird details. How would someone know who I dated nearly 20 years ago, and what would the motive be of making up a story that included that weird detail about my past? I have not had contact with a 10th grade boyfriend in over a decade. Yesterday, I decided to message him on Facebook to see if he has any insight. I tell him the whole story. He's just as confused as I am and claims to have no part in it. I am at a loss. I'm also really freaked out that some strange man is going through that much trouble at 1 a.m. to look for me. Any insights or ideas would be greatly appreciated. No, nothing else weird has happened since then. Update 1. Wow, this really blew up. Thank you so much for all the kind words and precautions that I should take. I want to add something here that a few people commented on, that might shine some light on this mystery. First off, I am not in any legal trouble and have no reason to think someone would be suing me. God, I guess it's always in the realm of possibility that I'm being sued by someone, but I really don't think that's it. Like I previously commented, I had an expired registration ticket that I did not show up to court for, but I believe I got a letter in the mail just asking me to pay a really large fee, so I don't think that's related. I did take a personal loan out. Took it out about a year and a half ago. It wasn't anything too crazy and I was really good with making payments on time until about 6 months ago when I had a medical issue. Currently, I am really behind on payments, but to my knowledge, I have not defaulted on the loan yet. What do you guys think? Related? I had absolutely no idea that this is a thing or I would have included this detail to begin with. Let me know your thoughts. Update 2. I have a list of a few things that I am going to look into tomorrow, based on my own thoughts and based on a ton of valuable feedback I got in here. Thank you. We'll post an update ASAP. Update 3. I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to update. It's a super busy time at work. Unfortunately, there isn't much to report. I called the loan company. They claim to have nothing to do with it. All of my friends and family also noted that the 1 a.m. factor kind of rules that out anyway. Nothing else strange has happened to my parents. I went there for the first time last night and kept a close eye out for anything, didn't observe anything out of the norm. So this remains a mystery. I'll be sure to update if something else happens. Final update. Alright, 1 year later I finally have an update to this insane mystery. I will include the original story here first, followed by the update. After this happened, my family and a couple of my close friends have been talking about this mystery in depth to try and put our heads together to figure it out. We all have our own theories, but ultimately no definitive answer as to what happened or who this creeper was. So we pretty much put it to rest and only continued to joke about it once in a while. Here's the update. My stepsister, my stepdad's daughter, and her fiancé were at a house party right after the holidays, around early January of this year. While they were there, they started talking to a girl that neither of them knew. After some time talking together, the girl started talking about her ex-boyfriend and how they were going through a really tough time together. They had just recently broken up and she felt really bad because he was a wreck over it. Somehow it came up that this girl's ex-boyfriend was my 10th grade boyfriend, the one with the really unique Italian name. The whole situation wasn't that big of a coincidence, since I went to high school with my stepsister's fiancé and we have a lot of mutual friends. So it makes sense that they were at a party that would include some people I went to high school with. As soon as my stepsister and her fiancé hear this, they both start freaking out and without revealing too many details, they tell the girl about the whole mystery and how weird it was. As they are telling the story, the girl's face starts to go white and she looks like she's about to cry. My stepsister and fiancé try to console her and ask her what's wrong. The wine beer had been flowing at this point, so I'm sure everyone was a little tipsy. The girl starts to tell them that a few nights ago, she was sleeping, and someone started banging on her door at, get this, fucking 1 a.m., just like what happened to me at my parents'. The girl jumps out of bed and says she was absolutely terrified by how loud and aggressive someone was banging on her door. She said she literally thought it was going to break in. The girl has a Ring camera, so looks at her phone. There on the camera is a guy in a black hoodie, banging on her door. She obviously pretends like she isn't home and keeps all of the lights off. He continues banging. As she is getting ready to dial 911, the guy stops and leaves. She said she was absolutely terrified. For whatever reason, she didn't end up calling the cops, but may have gone to stay with a friend that night or the night after. My stepsister and fiancé are shocked by the details and how similar it is to my story, especially because of the mutual ex-boyfriend we share, except this girl literally just broke things off with him. They asked the girl if she has any idea who the guy is and she said no, but that it definitely is not the actual ex-boyfriend. She said this guy was much taller and heavier than our shared mutual ex. How fucking weird. This mystery is still unsolved and these new details honestly just make my head spin even more. No one else has shown up to my parents' door since the actual incident a year ago. OP added extra info in the comments. So a few answers to some questions. My 10th grade boyfriend was into drugs when I dated him back in high school. No idea if he continued to use throughout his life or not, but can confirm he is definitely an addict who may or may not be in recovery currently. My 10th grade boyfriend has been to my parents' house multiple times. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in, and my 10th grade boyfriend has been over many times while we dated in high school. I don't know where he currently lives, but he grew up about 10 minutes away from my parents' house. My 10th grade boyfriend and I had a horrific breakup. I met my high school sweetheart while I was dating him and broke up with him in a pretty messed up way. He held a grudge over it all throughout high school and was extremely nasty to me to the point of bullying. At one point, I had to get a security guard to escort me to classes because him and his friends were bullying me so badly. The bullying was only severe for the rest of 10th grade, but he definitely hated me all throughout high school. At one point he did end up apologizing to me, and explained that he was just heartbroken over me breaking up with him, but at that point, I was way past the point of forgiving him. After graduating high school, we ran into each other maybe once or twice while I was home from college, and he was totally cordial and nice with me, and we laughed the high school experiences off. I can definitely try reaching out to him on Facebook again and bringing back up this whole mystery with the added updates from his recent ex-girlfriend to see what his reaction is and gauge whether or not he's being truthful in it. I can also ask some mutual high school friends who know him about how he currently is, if he's into any shady shit or not. My stepsister only gave me a first name and description of a recent ex-girlfriend from the party. But I can go on my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look for her under his friends, then reach out to her on Facebook Messenger to inquire about ring footage and ask her more questions. Also see if she ever reached out to cops. I agree this is probably the best thing to do if I want more answers, but I agree I need to be careful as I still don't know what is going on here. My 10th grade boyfriend does not have a brother, just one younger sister that I remember back from high school. Relevant comments from OP Comment 1. I just posted some answers in the comments about the nature of my breakup with my high school boyfriend and how horrific it was and how he basically harassed me for the rest of the 10th grade. Your last theory, and what a lot of other people are commenting on, is starting to make the most sense to me. It could be that my 10th grade boyfriend has a tendency to get insanely hung up on girls and is sending a close friend or relative to do these 1 a.m. drop-bys. And this would especially make sense if he is still using drugs like he did in high school. This theory being correct would mean he lied to me when I reached out to him on Facebook a year ago, which of course he would. If this is the case, it seems like he moved on to his current ex. I just hope he doesn't swing back around to me. Comment 2. I decided I'm going to try and find out the girl's full name so I can look her up on social media. I may even be able to find her with just the first name that I already know from my steps. I can go onto my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look in his friend list for a girl with the same first name who looks like she could have been his ex-girlfriend. He may even have pictures with her tagged, so it shouldn't be that hard, unless he wiped his social media clean of her after they broke up. When I'm able to find her, I'm going to reach out to her and try and get some answers. I think this is the safest route since I still don't know my 10th grade boyfriend's role in this, and I did already ask him once and he claimed to have no part in it or know anything, which may or may not have been a lie. Based on how scared my stepson said this girl was, I'm betting she'll be willing to talk to me about it since we share the experience. I will make an update post when I have more info. Thanks everyone. I've realized that I have lost all respect for my husband's willful ignorance, and it may damage my marriage. I, 33, and my husband, 37, were having a discussion about politics and we got onto the topic of our daughter, 7, which led to me expressing my fears about her rights and bodily autonomy. For context, my husband votes Republican and I have always considered myself independent but recently have been shifting very far away from my younger, carefree attitude toward politics. I love him very much and I know for a fact that he loves me, but I have started finding his opinions naive and lacking depth. He is a very good man though and has in the past changed his mind on several things when confronted with them. Further context, my cousin lives in a strict anti-abortion state and almost died a few years ago when the doctors waited until she was actively dying of sepsis before they decided it was okay to remove the dead baby from her body even though it had been dead for weeks beforehand. So needless to say I had a wake-up call and sharpened up my principles until they are very shiny and pointy. Last night when we were talking about abortion rights being healthcare, I lost my composure out of sheer terror about the possibility of a similar disaster with my cousin happening to our daughter and how I struggle to understand how he doesn't see the problem with his party and that in fact I think he is being willfully ignorant to the danger I and my daughter face in favor of his idea about making economics work for our family. I also said that if our daughter dies due to something preventable, like the ability to get a timely and much needed abortion, or gets shot to death in school, that I would let my own mother rot in a nursing home. She votes R2. And I'd never be able to look him in the face again, which would basically be me disappearing and divorcing him. I was crying and upset and explaining how scared I was, and he asked me in a very hurt manner if I'd actually abandon him like that. I am truthful to a fault and said that I would, perhaps out of a sense of illogical grief and betrayal, because I'd know my concerns were not taken seriously and that they had abandoned common sense and did nothing to attempt preventing a very real consequence of voting away mine and my daughter's right to health care. I equated it to a slow-motion car wreck with our daughter in mortal danger and him just watching it happen because it doesn't involve his own body. I know he needs to hear it. But I think I was too raw and open about it to steer the conversation in a healthy way, and I have a very blunt manner. I apologized this morning for saying that I'd leave him, even though I knew I would, and he tentatively accepted it. And I said we'd talk about things later when I can articulate things in a healthier way. But I'm at a loss as to how to make it known how deadly serious this is to me and not make him feel like I'd abandon our marriage over just any sensitive topic. I do not need people telling me to leave him. I don't think I know how to make it any more digestible and be clear without going nuclear over something that has not happened, as our daughter is too young to suffer that yet. The rub is that I am the person who is changing the dynamic of our relationship, and I'm beginning to understand how politics breaks up families. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Ask him to name scenarios that he would accept the premature death of his daughter. Ask him to name what life-saving healthcare he would be willing to deny for his daughter based on principles. If he can't name any, ask him why is abortion different. Use your cousin's story as a hypothetical for your daughter, but be as graphic with it as you can be. But in all honesty, if you must labor so much to convince him to care about yours and your daughter's health and well-being, then this should also serve as a wake-up call to you. And if I were you, I'd take back your apology. You meant what you said and only apologized to comfort him. I say let him be uncomfortable. Why are you so concerned with the bluntness of your words and not concerned about how quick he is to dismiss you? Comment 2. I'm the daughter of a Republican dad and liberal mom. I'm honestly not sure why they are still together, and think it is because they are older and retired. Luckily, I live in a liberal state that doesn't take away human rights, so I think it allows my mom not to think about it as much. It's been since Trump that I've really seen the division between them. I don't really have any advice to give you, but the perspective from a daughter in a similar type of situation. I love my dad, but I don't have a lot of respect for him because I don't think he actually understands what's going on. It hurts as a daughter to know my dad votes for a party that is actively doing bad to a lot of human rights, mainly because he believes in the economics of Republicans. I also hate having to be around my parents in the evening, especially if they are watching the news. My mom definitely holds frustration for my dad and takes it out by saying mean things to him. And I feel like my dad doesn't take it seriously, because I don't think he actually understands how scary this is for certain people. I wish my parents would do therapy together, and honestly you guys should probably do therapy together if you actually want to make your marriage work without resentment growing. Comment 3. The worst part is all these men talk about the economics of being a Republican, when all the data shows time and time again that those economics are absolutely horrible for 99.9% of us. They literally will cause harm to their families and others because they believe lies and don't want to hear otherwise. Comment 4. I understand why you don't want advice to leave him, but you may have to accept that as your reality simply because your morals, values, and ethics are no longer compatible. But of course, do everything you can to try to reach him. Obviously, deep down, you know him and know he has the potential. I went through this with my own husband years ago. And I wasn't nice about it. It was pretty much a deal breaker for me then, and now, and he was too busy being smugly libertarian on every other issue, so I had nothing to lose. That said, once he extracted his head from his rectum, I've been happy to explain things from my perspective as long as he's willing to actually listen. He's not perfect, but he gets a lot that men generally don't or take for granted. I do know that one of my big points was that his views meant I couldn't trust him. Women's reproductive rights sure don't affect men directly, but by not caring about the issue because they care about the women in their life, they are sending a clear message that women are interchangeable appliances. He either cares about the things that are important to you or he doesn't actually care about you. He can't claim to love and respect you and want a future with you if he's voting against your basic interests. That is hurtful for you, but you are allowing him to center his feelings hurt because you threatened to divorce him someday. He's hurting you now, but he wants to focus on his potential future pain that would be a direct consequence of his behavior now. Let that sink in. He is telling you exactly where you stand with him in multiple ways. Further, he's deluded if he thinks voting for Trump Republicans is going to actually be good for his finances. Maybe in the short term. The reality is that any gains he makes will be offset by the tax overhaul and tariff system. If your wealth is dependent on your income in any significant way, Trump winning would put your income at risk as women are forced out of the workplace and into a housewife role. If your income depends on either of you working overtime, Trump is giving employers a way to deny overtime premiums through creative scheduling. A lot of tax deductions and credits that primarily benefit low and middle class families are being eliminated while those that benefit the wealthiest are left intact or strengthened. We've already had a preview of his roided out trickle-down economy from his first term. Your husband is being incredibly short-sighted. Comment 5. I'm not sure what you are trying to achieve with this post. You say you don't need people telling you to leave him. However, the harsh reality is, in this situation, that is your present and your future, as long as you stick with Republican men. He is not a very good man when he puts your daughter's and every other woman's life at risk by voting for people who want nothing but destruction and power. That doesn't change, no matter how much you gaslight yourself that you can somehow fix him, or see reason. Sorry to be so blunt about it. Comment 6. This. If a man is a Republican, if he plans on voting for the GOP candidate, even if Trump keels over tomorrow and is replaced by someone who's less openly insane, if he is willfully ignorant, he is not a good man. Full stop. He can help old ladies cross the street and volunteer at a soup kitchen as a hobby, but he's still not a good man because he does not actually care about women. OP, you think you can fix your partner? You cannot. Nobody can fix another person. You can't be the person who is changing the dynamic of the relationship when you're not the bad actor. You should not have to explain why rolling back women's rights is fucked up to get someone to see that. He already knows and does not care. Update. We had a serious discussion. I went into more detail about my concerns and fears and it was intense. I was much better at presenting the case. I gave him several hypotheticals that involved a particularly gruesome set of circumstances involving his balls. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty, but the gist was to shift his perspective. I told him to seriously consider carrying a tiny fetus in his ballsack and the fact that the risks were things like exploding balls, sepsis, etc., and the myriad of ways he could end up dead, permanently physically injured and disfigured, or unable to produce a fetus in the future if he didn't have the option of removing the fetus from his balls. I asked him if he would even want to take the risk and he agreed that he'd be very likely to remove it unless he was ready for those risks. I asked him why in the world would I be justified in telling him he has to carry it no matter what and it might only be removed after it starts to explode out of his ballsack or his organs start shutting down. Once he seemed to start grasping the enormity of what abortion encompasses and seeing why it's very important to not let unknown people control what options you have with no medical reason. I told him I lost a bit of respect for willful ignorance, and that I can tell he avoided thinking about it. He knows in some way that it says something about his character. And I resented having to even give him a hypothetical in the first place, and that if he cares for me and our daughter that he should automatically actively be using his empathy skills every day. I explained how I have demonstrated the capacity to care about and evaluate gender issues he's brought to my attention in the past. That was a difficult part of the conversation. I also told him that I do not trust him to always make good decisions for us and that I feel alone in shouldering those responsibilities. He listened and let me talk a lot. He asked if I was going to leave him and he was clearly nervous and bracing for the worst. I told him I'm not taking drastic steps like that, but I certainly will when it comes to keeping our daughter healthy and safe. I also started to say something about how I know I would lie to him in a heartbeat in a situation where our daughter needed an abortion or medical care, and he interrupted me to say, "You wouldn't have to lie because I'll be driving the car or buying the plane tickets and we will all go anywhere we need to." Y'all, I burst into tears. We ended the conversation and he said I laid a lot on him and he needed a break but said he had things to think about. I didn't push any more politics, but I think I feel like my trust has been slightly restored. I'm not getting my hopes up, but I think he realizes that he's wading in dark and dangerous waters when it comes to our futures. Relevant comments. Comment 1. All of this reminds me so much of that scene in the show The Handmaid's Tale where June finds out that she's not allowed to access her bank account anymore and that her husband has to sign something for her to get birth control pills, and her husband dismisses her concerns, basically saying, "That's okay. I'll take care of you. No big deal, it's fine." It's easy to dismiss a concern when that concern doesn't seem to affect you directly. And the problem is that no matter what we say, no matter what example we give, some people will always have a degree of removal from an issue that can affect their understanding and their empathy. My own husband is empathetic and caring. But he doesn't understand why I, someone staring down the barrel of menopause, is so angry about abortion access restrictions. He doesn't understand why I, a woman in a loving marriage that doesn't look likely to end anytime soon, is upset about the end of no-fault divorce. Or why I, as someone with no connection to prison, is upset about our horribly inequitable carceral system. And he will say he understands my objections, but then he's like, why bother wasting energy getting upset about it? I don't know how to get across to him that just because it doesn't apply to me or us right now doesn't mean it won't later. I also don't know how to get across to him that it's very difficult to see attacks on our ability to get a divorce or access an abortion as a direct slap against me as a woman. If someone punches someone else like me in the face while staring me directly in the eye to show me that they would be doing it to me if they could, that's very upsetting. But they aren't looking him in the eye, so he doesn't see it that way. Comment 2. I admire the heck out of you for having this huge conversation with your husband. Thank you for making the case for all of us. And thanks for sharing with us. I hope your example can help others who need to have serious discussions like this with people in their lives. Comment 3. I'm glad you have this talk and that he is starting to reconsider his decisions. But I hope you are very clear with him that this isn't about him setting aside his views for the special case of you and his daughter. Other women are entitled to the same respect and autonomy that he wants for his daughter. If his position is that he will pack the bags and buy the tickets for y'all, but he will nonetheless continue to vote for all other women to be oppressed, he's not a good man. OP. We talked about the women getting turned away from emergency rooms across the country because they were having pregnancy complications for babies they likely wanted to keep, and it was like I could see a gear start cranking in his head. Total silence, like he'd never considered that a lot of women who seek emergency abortions actually wanted their babies. Comment 4. My husband and I had this discussion before our first was born. This was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the writing was on the wall that it might go. We live in a very HCOL city for my job, but things weren't going well, and we were debating moving. I told him that as long as kids were on the table, moving to a red state was out of the question. I refused to move to a place where I would not be able to get access to care that I needed and end up dead just because we were trying to have a child. My husband brushed it off. One of his close family members is one of the most prominent OBGYNs in the country. He said that, when the worst came to worst, she would help us out. But I said, how exactly? Imagine I'm suffering from sepsis and about to die, and the hospital I'm in literally will not perform an abortion. What exactly will she do? And he stopped in his tracks. That ended the discussion right there. My husband had simply never had to consider it before. At the time, we weren't seriously thinking about kids, so he hadn't really thought it through. In any case, in a few short years, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I ended up pregnant with our first child. I'm currently pregnant with our second. We still have regular discussions about potentially moving. Never once subsequently has he ever considered a red state. Comment 5. So glad he finally understood the reason why we need to vote the way we do to protect our bodies. But is he going to back up what he says he now understands by voting the opposite of what he's done before? Comment 6. I hate that many men only recognize women's bodily autonomy when they become fathers. I hope you really talk to him about voting Republican this year, otherwise this whole thing is really moot. Comment 7. I'm glad he understood, but he still votes Republican. The Democratic Party is still right-wing. No, they are not leftist unless you're talking about the progressives, but your husband deliberately chose to vote for the more racist, ableist, sexist, bigoted in every way party. The only reason you had this discussion is because it affects you and your daughter on the basis of gender and sex. I'm not going to tell you to get a divorce, but you should probably take a good look at your own morals and principles if you still think it's okay for him to vote the way he does. Especially given everything that has happened since 2016. Editor's note: OP seems satisfied with her discussion with her husband, whether you disagree or not, so is unlikely to update. Therefore, I have marked this conclusion. Am I the asshole for deciding to divorce after discovering that my wife had a tattoo of another man's name while I was away? My wife of 4 years got a tattoo recently with her best friend who has a very aggressive type of bone cancer. She didn't discuss it with me at all. I just did it while I was on a training mission. Came home Monday morning to her with his name tatted on her neck with a Pokemon. I have not returned home since I saw it. I have been sleeping in the barracks. I am honestly thinking about just filing for divorce. Am I wrong? Edit. I have heard from a few of my neighbors that she basically moved him in for the 6 weeks I was away on a training mission. And left a few days before I returned. She is refusing to even discuss it. All she keeps saying is it has nothing to do with me and her. Update 1. She was served divorce papers yesterday at our previous home together. She thought it would be a good idea to involve both our families without giving them a reason or context. I filed for divorce after I got home from my last training mission. So as the parents called, I told them about the tattoo and her moving him in while I was gone, and let them deal with her. Relevant comments. OP added in the comments. Spoke with my CO about it. He said I should just let Jag handle the paperwork. And he will have me in a new duty station by Monday. He said a man can't live with that level of disrespect, and I agree with him. Comment 1. What did you say to her when you first saw it? And how did she react to you? OP, I asked her what she did. And she said I got a Pokemon tattoo and showed me. I saw his name on her neck, and I just went quiet and picked up my bags and walked back on base. Went and saw my CO and had a drink with him. Comment 2. If my partner puts any other name on his body than my kids, his family or me, it's a problem. They could have done a tattoo without a name and on a place that isn't so out of the open. The tattoo on itself isn't an issue, but the name and place is. OP, exactly. It hurts that she turned me down last year about getting matching tattoos to just get one with her Pokemon Go buddy. But it's not the tattoo that is the complete disrespect and disregard that it's a constant symbol of. Update 2. Got all my ducks in a row, as they say. Sat down and spoke with my future ex-wife. She honestly expects me to just step aside and let her play house with her friend. Pause our marriage, wait till they are done, then continue our life together like nothing happened. I can't live with her plan, so I'm getting divorced. Wasted nearly 6 years on her already, not wasting any more of my life on her. Will be in my new duty station by the end of June. A fresh start, I hope, and put all this behind me. Relevant comments. How has his wife tried to reconcile? She has been endlessly trying to just communicate with me. After she failed to contact me personally, she went to our parents and siblings, and when that failed, she started contacting friends and people in my unit, spouses of people in my unit. She is absolutely relentless, and it's always the same bullshit about how this is just temporary because he is not long for this earth. And I would do the same thing for a terminally sick friend. What does her family say about everything? No, they are not at all pleased. At first, her parents came at me because all she told them was I left her out of the blue after returning from a training mission. I told the truth about how she got a neck tattoo with her friend's name and had him living in our house while I was on my training mission. Update 3. This morning, my commanding officer pulled me from a training flight to inform me of my wife's death and got me on a flight back to North Carolina. Should arrive at my parents' house in about 8 hours. A month ago, I filed for divorce and changed duty stations and cut her completely out of my life. I didn't want to hear how this thing with her friend James was temporary and how our marriage would go back to normal after he passed. I am not suicidal or anything like that, but I am profoundly saddened. I keep thinking how 6 months ago we were happy and in love. And now she took her own life when I just didn't accept what she was doing for a friend who was dying from cancer. I am riddled with self-doubt and blaming myself for her actions. Thinking about everything and our parents having been friends for decades, she is now dead in the water, another victim of her delusion. I know these were all her choices but still feel guilty for her death. I don't know if hell is real or not, but I hope James ends up there for what he has caused. Update 4. Had a meeting with the funeral home today. She already set most everything up and paid for it a little over a week ago. We are having a memorial service at my in-laws' house on Wednesday. Her ashes will need to be picked up in a few days. I have a grief counseling session on Friday morning. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I'm sorry for your loss. Did she ever admit to cheating? I might have missed it. OP. A week or so ago my mother called me and confirmed she was almost 3 months pregnant, so that confirmed she was sleeping with him when I was away for 6 weeks. Comment 2. Wait a sec. She was taking care of a friend with cancer and you lost your shit over it, causing a divorce, and that plunged her probably into a depression and she took her life. Sounds like you were the problem here, not so much her. OP. Not exactly. She hit the pause button on our marriage so she could play house with him while I was on a training mission in California. Without informing me. Was pregnant with his child when I came back and wasn't going to tell me. If it wasn't for the stupid tattoo she got with his name, I might have fallen for it. And slept with her, and she would have had me raise his child as my own. Comment 3. Oh, what a jerk. I'm so sorry. Now I think your wife committed suicide to join him in the other life. Probably both went to hell for their selfishness. OP. I'm not sure if he has passed or not. Pretty much left and crawled under a rock for the last few weeks. Comment 4. I was wondering if James was still alive. Did you say how your wife? How do I ask without sounding rude? Killed herself. OP. Found out she wrote 10 letters to different people, including me. Then she emptied the medicine cabinet while her family was out. They came home, and she was in her bed and had passed away. Comment 5. What was the nature of her relationship with him? Was she giving him palliative care or having an affair with him? OP. He was still active as in up and around hell as of last week. He was still working at the card shop, I was told. So we'll say an affair. Am I the asshole for refusing to share my only gluten-free plate with a pregnant friend despite her cravings and emotional pleas at breakfast? I recently found out I have a gluten allergy, which explains all of the stomach pains and aches I've had when trying to eat anything my whole life. Since finding out about the allergy, I've been making sure to avoid foods that contain even trace amounts of gluten, because even a small amount causes indigestion and in some cases vomiting. I was invited out to breakfast with some of my friends and I let them know of the allergy so we could pick somewhere that actually had food I could eat. The place we settled on is a really high-end breakfast restaurant that has a whole separate kitchen, or at least a section of the kitchen, for preparing their food without gluten. Which was a lifesaver since had that not been the case, I would have needed to skip the restaurant entirely. Included in my friends was a couple, who recently got pregnant. We can call them Emma and Via. Via is the one who is pregnant, and said she wouldn't be having much since she wasn't feeling very well due to the morning sickness. Everyone understood and offered to let her just have a few bites off their plates so she could still have something nice even if it was just a little. I didn't agree to this though, since if they were going to be sharing with each other, I couldn't take part. I explained to myself not feeling okay sharing since I'd just be giving food without getting any, and all my friends seemed to completely understand, as well as agree that was very fair. When the food came out, everyone was sharing and having a good time. Via asked if she could have a bite of my food, and I politely declined sharing since I couldn't grab a different bite from anyone else. Via told me her pregnancy cravings were kicking in, and all she was asking for was a couple bites, so I should have just given that to her. I told her again, I'd already explained I didn't want to share since my food was all I had. Emma told me I could just give her half, and order more food if I wasn't satisfied with the amount left, and I again told them no. The gluten-free options were quite a bit more expensive than what they were eating, and paying for 2 plates just so Via could have half my food didn't seem fair. Via then told me just because I was on a diet didn't mean I could be selfish, and everyone else had no issues sharing. Thankfully the rest of the people sitting there did help me stand up for myself, and told Via I'd already explained I wouldn't be sharing since no one could share back. While I'd ordered an egg scramble and some gluten-free pancakes, everyone else had normal pancakes, French toast, avocado toast and other things I just couldn't eat. Via wasn't satisfied with their and my justification for why she couldn't have any of my food. She went on and on about how I'd turned the whole table against her, and shamed her for being pregnant and hungry. I told her if she'd gotten her appetite back, she could always order herself a plate so she didn't need to rely on anyone sharing their food. Via went off at this, and told me about all the things she's needed to pay for in preparation of her and Emma's baby. She told me I was being selfish and heartless because I didn't want to give her half my plate when I could afford to do so. This is where I may be the a-hole because I told Via she chose to get pregnant, and she chose to go through all of the issues that come with it. I didn't choose to have a glucose allergy, and I didn't want to go hungry because she wanted to eat off everyone else for free. Via started ugly crying, and everyone tried to calm her down, but she and Emma ended up just leaving without paying their portion of the bill. No one blamed me since I was right, but Emma sent me a message telling me I could have just said no and left it at that. Instead of embarrassing Via in front of all her friends. I'm starting to feel very guilty. I didn't want either of them to leave, I just wanted her to stop trying to leverage her pregnancy against me as a way to get the only food I could eat. AITA. ETA. Trying to answer some of the most answered questions. Yes. Emma did get a plate. She claimed it was too sweet for Via and she should grab a less sweet bite of everyone else's plate. The reason it went from 1 bite to half my food, which was 1 pancake of my 2, was because she assumed my food was less sweet due to being gluten-free. I don't think that's the case, but that was just her logic. The group agreed we wouldn't be spending as much time with either Emma or Via. Ever since getting married, the two of their bitchiness aspects have combined and multiplied. We also did send them a Venmo request for their part of the bill. They've been told they can either pay the bill, or they can never come out to eat with us again. Am I the asshole for being upset that my wife frequently mentions Trump in our family prayers, even during grace before meals and bedtime prayers? Sounds a bit weird, but let me explain. I, 32, am a politically neutral guy. My wife, 25, is not. She is pretty hardcore Make America Great Again, and has been since 2016 or whenever the last election was. She is pretty vocal on Facebook about her views and sometimes says some scary things. One time she asked my coworker to his face if he was documented. We literally grew up together in the Midwest, laughing out loud. Anyway, I usually let it slide because it's not hurting me. Like I said, I'm politically neutral. Last month though, she was getting my son, 5, to bed one night, and after reading to him she did a prayer before bed. Normal stuff like, please pray for mommy, daddy, grandpa, and Trump. When I heard her say that, I was confused why she was praying for just a guy who isn't in our family. I asked her about it really politely and she went off on me about how he is persecuted and needs prayers to win the election and fend off the enemy and whatever. Again, I let it go because I normally wouldn't care. But now she seems like she is doing this to spite me. Even during the blessing before a meal she adds, and bless Trump, amen, really fast before I can argue. Last night was the worst one though. My dad, 77, had a small stroke and went to the hospital overnight. After I told her and my son, I did a small prayer for him. Of course, before I said amen, my wife added, and bless Trump. Well, this time I got mad. I told her she should keep him out of our family prayers and that this is our personal connection with God she is messing with by bringing in some weird old politician. Suffice it to say, she hasn't talked to me since. Am I really in the wrong here? Maybe it's not that big of a deal, but I feel like it's gone too far. Am I the asshole? Top comments. Comment 1, damn. So you married a general asshole and now you're upset she's being an asshole to you specifically. You're not the asshole for asking your wife to not be petty when your father is in the hospital and you're feeling scared. But also, you chose the bed you're lying in. You're just starting to realize politics impacts all eventually. Comment 2. I let it slide because it's not hurting me. I can tell you that this political disconnect would be a deal breaker for me. And she's about to create another Make America Great Again supporter right under your nose. And you're okay with that. Forget that. Comment 3. Honestly, your wife openly being racist by asking a coworker if he's documented and you not putting your foot down right there does not sound like you're politically neutral. You allowed that behavior and just let it slide. That's not good, mate. You're not the asshole for being upset with your wife bringing Trump into your prayer over family, what the F, but you need to have a long talk with her about her general behavior and her comments, aside from just this latest issue. Comment 4. You're literally how the Nazis happened. It doesn't affect me, just everyone else, so I'm cool with it. Your wife is either a gullible moron who went down the wrong internet rabbit hole or is a fascist. I know people like to throw that word around a lot, but that's because they don't know what it means. But what we're seeing in the States and in the world in general is a scary march towards authoritarianism that is anathema to the free world. I'd take my kid and run, but hey, it doesn't affect you, right? Like, she was racist to your boyhood friend's face. Update. So I mentioned in my previous post that my dad suffered from a small stroke the night before. Well, the small stroke was just the tip of the iceberg. Today my dad suffered a major stroke in the hospital and passed away last night. My whole family is devastated, including my wife. When I said a prayer over him, she did not say anything about Trump and was very respectful. After we got home from the hospital, I messed up. We were getting ready for bed and I thanked her. She asked for what, and I said for not bringing up Trump during the prayer for my dad. She immediately got mad at me about why I thought she was such a terrible person who would do something like that. I said she literally did it when we first found out he had a small stroke, and she said to me that it was before she knew it was that serious. I said that it was my dad, and of course it was serious to me. Then I really messed up and showed her the post I made yesterday to try to get her to understand. She read through all the comments and got even more mad at everything, of course. Long story short, she drove off to her friend's house and left me having to deal with my son and without a car. Later, she made this huge Facebook post about me and how I'm a terrible person. She said I made her drop out of college when I met her as a freshman, in college, and forced her to start a family with me. We met when we were 18 or older and the kid was her idea, but whatever. I assume she got this idea from some of the comments about the age difference between us, so thanks. And then of course she says that I'm against her and her beliefs and all the usual about Trump. I may update if something else happens, but whatever. Thanks to some of you for actually trying to help. I could ignore calling me a troll, but apparently I'm a bad person for being politically neutral and basically a Nazi. I am not choosing a side on purpose to have less conflict because if you can't tell, both sides are what caused the conflict. My dad died and my wife drove off and won't talk to me, but who cares because apparently I'm a troll/Nazi/groomer or whatever. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I'm not going to address the political donkey or the elephant in the room. What I'm going to comment on is your wife's total lack of compassion and grace. Even if she had been justified in her anger and hurt, it was totally out of bounds to put you through that the night your father died. That is a hard issue way beyond politics. Comment 2. Sorry about your dad. Beyond your wife's troubling views about a guy who said he wants to be a dictator, her leaving you alone right after your father died is particularly troubling. Not the asshole. Comment 3. So your dad died and the next day she treats you like shit over Trump. And left you stuck with a kid and no car. You are not the asshole, but her asshole issues have more issues than a newspaper. Comment 4. My dude, both sides are not the same. Your wife is a victim of a toxic cult of personality, and you and your family are victims as well. It's not healthy to worship an individual like she does. And inferring from your previous post, as Christians you should be very wary of such a person. Liberals, progressives, and regular old Democrats aren't even the same thing, but none of them really adhere to the same level of cult worship as Republicans do for Donald Trump. It's just not something you really see. I'm sorry that your wife has been programmed. Consider her dead, she's not the same. I lost my own father this way. Everything is political. Even as evidence crushes the conspiracies he's sold, he's still 100% indoctrinated into the cult. He's gone. Your wife is gone. My husband admitted to cheating with his best friend. I'm not mad, and I don't know why. What should I do? I, 35, have been married to my husband for a bit under 10 years now. We have no children. Yesterday night, After dinner, my husband, Jay, broke down and admitted he's been sleeping with his childhood best friend, Pete, for quite a while now, longer than I want to say. It was the first time I have seen him cry in more than 2 years over something serious. Jay is the kind that cries over dogs dying in shows but is stony silent at tragedy. However, I'm not mad. I'm not even sure I care. I do love my husband more than anything in the world and I don't want to leave him. I can't move on, I can't stay like this and I don't want to. But Jay has said he won't stop seeing Pete, no matter what I choose. He's sorry for doing this to me and he has said he loves me, and I'm his wife and heart, but Pete means the same to him. Basically he can't choose. He loves us both. It falls to me to choose and I don't know what to do. Honestly, the bit that hurts the most is the fact that Pete is a good friend of mine, but he couldn't face me himself and instead let Jay break down in front of me. Sorry this turned into a rant, any advice would help. If anyone's gone through something similar. TLDR, husband cheated with a friend, wants me to choose between staying with him and him continuing to see as a fair partner and divorce. I can't choose without advice. I want to stay with him. I honestly don't feel anything about this affair honestly. Edit. It's come up a bit so, my husband has been openly bisexual since before I even met him. Peter is bi or pan. He's dated guys and girls, and others, in the past. No one in the last 3 years to my knowledge. I'm straight. Edit 2. Since apparently I have no self-esteem, I guess I couldn't possibly have 4 degrees, a PhD, make roughly $120K a year, be the main provider for the household, run my own business and go to the gym twice a week. I know I look good, I actually have a rather large ego about myself. This honestly has nothing to do with self-esteem. I don't know where it reads that, I'm a poor little girl who got in over her head by a big strong man, but I can bench press Jay and wait. I know what I'm worth and I know I want Jay so. Relevant comments. Comment 1, leave OP, I don't know if I should though. We're happy, we can still be happy. Throwing that away seems, I don't know. Comment 2, so you don't mind sharing your husband. How many nights a week will you get to be with him? Or will his friend be moving in with you? OP, I don't know. He's managed to be with Pete enough in the time we currently have, I don't know how it would change if I stayed. Comment 3. What I don't understand is, why don't you want better for yourself? He told you he doesn't care if you stay or leave. But Pete? He stays I think because he cares about his relationship with Pete. How do you stay with someone who doesn't care if you stay? He doesn't want to fight for this relationship. You yourself said you don't care that he cheated. You are financially independent, what's keeping you from just ending it and moving on? You say you love him, but if you did, wouldn't you care that he's cheated for years with a person you considered a friend? Wouldn't you care that he's chosen his relationship with Pete as the one he can't let go of? OP, must be how I wrote the post, sorry. Jay does care, he just can't choose and doesn't want to force me to choose. He's staying at a friend's house, not Pete's. I double-checked, he's staying with a married couple of lesbian friend we have, so he's not cheating with them, right now, so I have the house and quote, as long as I need to do anything. Is it bad that I don't really care that he cheated? I have some heartache of the lies and who it was with, not that it was a man, but Pete, but the actual cheating itself doesn't bother me too much and I honestly think I could just move on, ignore it or somehow work with it. Update. After reading all your advice I chose to ask for space, which he, J36M, freely gave. He was staying at a friend's house when I called, I couldn't face him yet, and asked. This helped to confirm what I already knew, he was indeed staying with our mutual friends. A married lesbian, both 36F couple, so no he didn't run to Pete, 36M as some of you thought. I was leaning towards separation after reading your advice. Well, a few days after I requested space, I decided to ask for separation officially. To cut a long ice cream and tear-filled 3 weeks short, I caved and called him. I did not beg for him back or anything like that. I asked him out for a walk and we had a long talk. It was a fair while ago so I can't word for word type what was said, but it boiled down to this. 1. I still love him no matter what. 2. He still loves me no matter what. 3. He loves Pete no matter what. 4. He does not value either of us above the other. When he spoke about me leaving but him not leaving Pete, he was giving me an out more than anything else. Jay would be destroyed if I chose to leave but he didn't want me to stay if I truly didn't want to, which is why he didn't beg for me to stay. After this talk, we stayed separate for a few more days. About 7 weeks ago, Jay moved back home and Pete came over for dinner. That talk was longer, harder and contained more personal details that I do not want to share here. But the points were as follows. Jay and Pete have not been together as long as I feared. It's about 28 months, Not since they were teens. Pete truly didn't want me to get hurt and he was the one pushing Jay to be honest with me. Pete is gay, but he dated girls in the past. Neither of us are attracted to each other and we are not together. We are all going to individual and couples and group therapy. Couples are each of us as. Me and Jay need to work out our marriage and emotions, Pete and Jay need to work out the secrecy and talk through their own relationship, and Pete and I want to work on working together. Something I should have mentioned but didn't due to the fact I knew how Reddit would react, is I'm asexual. I am not in any way sexually attracted to my husband, or anyone for that matter. However, I choose to have sex with him as I know he enjoys it. I still have a libido, I just don't feel the need to have sex. When I have sex with Jay, rarely, once every 2-ish month, it isn't a chore but more a more intimate cuddle. Jay knows this and has known this our entire marriage. In fact, he was the one who helped me figure out I was asexual. If this is hard for you to understand, remember attraction choices. Asophobes will be blocked with no reply, honest questions can be answered. So yeah, that's my story. I can take further questions in the comments. TLDR, we separated, cried, got back together, are happy, I got a promotion and we are all in therapy together and individually. Relevant comments. Comment 1, sorry I'm a bit confused. Are you guys a throuple minus the sex? Or did you get back together with Jay and accept he has sex with Pete? Also, does that mean you now don't have to have sex with Jay out of obligation anymore, because he's getting his needs met by Pete? OP, me and Pete are not together. I don't know if I will have sex with Jay again, it's something I'm working on in therapy. My sister is severely autistic, requiring constant attention and unable to care for herself. I have been hating her for a long time. Am I the asshole? The title makes me sound horrible, but hear me out. My sister is severely autistic. She requires attention almost 24/7 and cannot be left alone. She is nonverbal and cannot take care of herself at all. Despite the fact that she is only 12, she is extremely destructive and violent and destroys anything she gets her hands on. I hate her. That should be wrong to say, but it doesn't feel like it. I was only 6 years old when she was born, and since then I've never solely had my parents' attention. Even since I can remember, the world has revolved around her. I was moved out of my room into the basement at 7 because she needed to be in the room next to my parents. All of my toys as a child were destroyed by her and my parents simply ignored me when I complained. Even when I was 14 and she destroyed a Mac my school gave me, I was in the wrong. Along with this, I am expected to take care of her and drop everything I do for her. I can never make plans with a friend because my parents expect me to be there if they need me to take care of her. Even when I do somehow get time to myself, I'm required to leave if they need me. If I do not, then I am punished. The recent example of this is when I went to see the new Spider-Man movie, and was grounded because I turned my phone off in the theater. It seems as if I am nothing more than a slave to them and anything involving her simply overshadows me. This last week I was chosen to give a speech at a school event. I was so excited and my parents promised to be there, but they never showed and claimed it was because of my sister. Anytime anything like this happens for me, they are too busy with her. I've held this in for so long and it finally spilled out today. While talking about colleges with my father, he joked that I should get a degree that pays well so when they're gone I can take care of my sister. I don't know why, but this caused me to break down. I cried and screamed about how it was always about her. I'm nothing more than a caretaker to them, that they always make it about her and that I'm expected to be her slave for the rest of my life. I've locked myself in my room since then and my parents have not come to check on me. Am I an asshole here? Edit. Wow, thank you for all the support and love that you guys have given me. I never expected this post to reach the popularity it did. Thank you all. After thinking about it for these past few hours, you are right that I don't despise my sister. It's not her fault that she was born the way she is. My parents came to talk to me a while after my breakdown, but I was unable to bring myself to talk to them and only cried and asked them to leave. They have made arrangements with my grandfather for me to stay with him for the time being and am getting ready to go to his house. My parents want to talk to me, but we have decided it's best I leave for now to have some space and time to collect myself. We will be sitting down and talking later this week about this issue. Thank you all again for the love and support through this. I'll send an update your guys' way later this week if people are interested. Relevant comments. Comment 1 NTA. These are perfectly legitimate and understandable feelings. You have done nothing to sign up for taking care of another human being. It's not like she's your kid, and that was wrong of your dad to joke about, because it sounds like he probably is really thinking along those lines. Be honest with your parents about how you feel, make clear that it's insane that you're expected to be a full-time babysitter, grounded for no phone in a theater. That's fucking bullshit. Comment 2, NTA. Kid, I hope you go to college far away from home. Later in life, make sure your parents understand that you won't be taking responsibility, so they better have care and funding in place. Comment 3. If you can, go to college far away. Time away and on your own to be just you will be good for you. Because I think your dad was only half joking. At some point you will want to have a conversation about how they need to plan for the care of your sister in the future. And make it clear that it is not you, especially if you feel the same way as you do now. I'm really sorry your parents didn't handle this better, and I hope that one day your anger moves away from your sister. Comment 4. This is a parent problem, not a sister problem. I am a parent of one autistic child and one neurotypical child. And I will tell you that we would never treat our NT child like his role is to take care of his sister. If she ruins his stuff, we replace it. We have also given him some separate space, with a lock, so that we can prevent her getting into his stuff. Now if he leaves it out, that's another story, but we try our best. Are there ways in which having a sister with a disability still might suck for him? Of course. We're a family, and what impacts one tends to impact us all. But we try to mitigate that, and at least sympathize when we can't. We also make sure that he benefits in whatever ways we can. Like the fact that he has never had to wait in a long line at an amusement park because of her skipping the line pass. It sounds like your parents haven't done any of this, and have in fact, made everything worse for you. That is not your sister's fault. She can't help who she is, and at only 12, she is still learning and growing, and you may still have a great relationship once you're both adults. Your parents, on the other hand, should have done better by you. The brunt of your anger belongs to them. Update. Well, since that day I made the post, I've been staying with my grandfather. The week's been honestly a huge change for me, for better and for worse, but I'll try to run it down. I started by telling my grandpa the story of why I broke down the way I did, and to be honest, he seemed horrified. No one in my family knew my parents were using me as essentially a free care service for my sister. My grandpa told me some things that I don't feel comfortable repeating here, but in essence my sister is supposed to be getting care from a professional and that my parents were ignoring that. Along with this, I was not supposed to be caring for her at all with her mental state, as apparently she is a danger to herself and others. With everything else I told him, along with stuff like the movie Indecent, he was really mad and told me to not contact my parents without him there. He pretty much told me that he would be meeting with my parents beforehand and that he was going to be there when I sat down with them. It didn't end here either. The rest of the week consisted of other family checking in on me and telling me things my parents hid from me. This included the fact that my parents have been taking money from the family to fund a caretaker that doesn't exist. Suffice to say, this week has been rough. But the upside is that even through all this, my extended family has been giving me more love than I've felt in a while. My grandfather spent this last week making up for the time I've lost, encouraging me to spend time with friends and do things I want to do. My aunts and uncles have also been helping me through the week. Well, Saturday night I sat down with my parents to talk. It went badly, to say the least. They came clean to me about everything. They told me things I will not repeat here. But they did not apologize. My parents still claim that I somehow owed my sister my time. My father even saying, "You were put here to be her caretaker." I won't lie and say I was composed. After everything I learned, I confronted them on the fact that my sister needed a caretaker, the money my dad was taking from his sister, and a few other things. They denied it or made excuses. And in the end, we ended off in a worse place than before. Today will be my last time talking to them for a while. After talking with my grandfather and uncle last night, I'm not going back. Later today I'm going there and picking up my stuff and moving in with my grandfather. When I graduate high school, I'm planning on leaving the state to go to school. My aunt has told me that the money she was sending my dad will instead be coming to me from now on. My parents have called me twice since Saturday. Neither of them were to apologize and only ask when I was coming home. I won't be going back to them. Right now I still feel pretty uneasy about everything, but I feel like that will pass. The rest of my family is showing their support to me, and honestly, it feels great. But in the end I lost my parents. Over all of this I've learned something that I wished I saw earlier. I don't hate my sister. In fact, I love her with all my heart. I should never have projected my hate onto her. That was wrong, and someday I hope to make up for it. But for now I need to leave. So here's my update. Thanks again for the support my original post got. I really appreciate everyone who took the time to comment or show me support. Thank you. Edit. Thank you all so much. I wish I could respond to every single one of you, but my lunch only lasts so long. I'll update tonight how the move out went, but until then, thank you all. I want to say that your support has been amazing and your kindness means more to me than anyone could ever imagine. Late edit. Wow, I never imagined my story would reach the popularity it did. I know it's kinda cliché and I've said it 1,000 times, but thank you all. We just got back from moving my things out of my parents' house. Everything I wanted to take my grandpa and uncle helped move, and it's at my grandpa's house now. I have my birth certificate, social security card, and every other document and record I could think of. My parents were quiet the whole time I was there. Shortly after I arrived, my dad left with my sister and my mom only hovered over us silently as I moved. It took a while, but as we left she broke down and told me she loved me and would miss me. I hugged her and said goodbye, and that was it. Even now I sit here and think if she really meant it. After this whole week of her not saying anything, she waited till the end. I hope she meant it. Right now though, I think I just need to look ahead. Maybe one day me and my parents can reconnect. I hope so. Thank you all for the advice and love. It's been amazing, and I'm glad that through this experience I at least got some positive out of this mess. Will I come back? I don't know. If something happens and you guys still want an update, I'll maybe come around again. But for now I'm going to move on. For all those out there who shared their stories with me, thank you, and I hope to see you on the other side. See you, Space Cowboy. Relevant comments. Comment 1, OP's grandfather is a saint. Comment 2, the sad thing is that he should have had to be as kind and good as he was. The parents were disgusting people who robbed someone of the necessary childhood experiences and felt no remorse for it. Comment 3. Yeah, I feel really bad for OP. It broke my heart when he talked about how all his toys got wrecked and no one cared. Another angle that I'm not seeing being discussed, OP's sister is being robbed too. If the parents were told she needs a caretaker, then she needs a caretaker. Maybe she would be able to make some improvements if she was working with a professional. I get that she's low functioning, but it's possible that she can sense the animosity OP was beginning to feel toward her, which is not his fault. Which could cause her to lash out more. IDK, I have a severely autistic cousin. He is verbal and doesn't need 24/7 supervision though, and he has a loving family who is always there for him. I wonder how lost he would be without that support system. OP's parents obviously don't care about their autistic daughter. If they did, they wouldn't push her off on a teenage brother who obviously isn't capable of handling that responsibility, or use her to scam their family. I just hope she will be okay. What are the parents going to do with her now that their free babysitter and money are gone? Are they going to pay for a professional caretaker themselves, or just neglect her? OP, if you see this, this is not a guilt trip, but someone in your family should keep tabs on what's going on with your sister. It sounds like she may be better off in an institution than with parents who obviously can't or aren't willing to give her the care she needs. Comment 4. I'm glad your other family is coming through for you, OP. I strongly suggest you still get a therapist to help you unpack the years of harm your parents did to you. Also, yay Grandpa, he sounds awesome. Good luck, OP. However, I would wait until you enter a college university to begin seeing a therapist. This way, 1. You will be guaranteed confidentiality as an 18-year-old, 2. You will likely be covered under a student plan that you pay for with tuition that will make therapy free, and 3. You'll have time to compose yourself when you're alone and really be able to sort out your feelings. Comment 5. I understand your predicament, for I also come from a similar situation. My older brother has autism spectrum disorder, and is on the low end of the scale. My parents, since I was about 7 years old, always stressed that I needed to take care of him and allow him to live with me once I was older, despite the 4-year age difference, alongside his physically and sexually abusive tendencies towards me, and only me, out of our family of 5. Now, I am 20 years old. Since I was 18, my parents have expected me to pay for items he desires, read for him, clean for him, pretty much anything you could think of, despite me being a college student with many chronic illnesses that was being abused by him since I was 11. Despite everything he has done, I do not hate him or his disability. Rather, I hate that my parents have enforced that his abusive behavior was not morally incorrect, thus insisting to him that I was wrong and hated him for his disability. No matter how much I expressed to him that his behavior was wrong and that I did not resent his disability, as I am severely disabled myself, he never listened or corrected his behavior until I began to distance myself from him at all available chances at 19 years old. He is my brother and he needs help, but I cannot be the one to give it to him because I deserve better than the life I was provided by our parents and him. I plan on moving out very soon. I hope things get better for you soon, and that you are able to reconcile with your sister as you desire without parental interference. Good luck, OP.